Good afternoon. Madam Clerk.
Members of City Council, please attend a call meeting of the City Council to be held in City Council Chamber, 801 Crawford Street, 6 p.m. Monday, April 27, 2015, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Members of Council, if you would please indicate your presence electronically. There are 7 members of City Council present.
Right.
Members of Council, at this time we have your Historic Preservation Commission appeal. There are 3 items. What is planned for this evening is that the representatives from the Commission will get 10 minutes to present their case. The applicant will get 10 minutes to present his case, and then Council will deliberate on the items. This does require that you vote on each of the appeals separately. They're being covered as a whole because it's one applicant, but it's for 3 different addresses.
Got it.
Okay? 3 different votes. Yes, sir.
Right.
So at this time, we call forward the representative from the Historic Preservation Commission.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Rebecca Laris. I live on Middle Street in Portsmouth, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor, Council members, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow HPC commissioners and I are entrusted to uphold our city's historic preservation guidelines and to protect our homeowners' investments and their property values and the historic character that has survived in our city for centuries. In our cases, you will hear Mr. Dan Aston tell you that your commission has erred in interpreting the guidelines. We have not erred, and this is why. Mr. Aston thinks that we should have allowed him to replace his historic slate roof with modern asphalt shingles. If you've read the information he submitted, you should know that the cases he cites are clearly not the same as his houses. Those past exceptions have been properties not seen from the public right-of-way, new construction, or in some cases, only partial slate roofs. We've gone over and over these cases, and they are not the same as Mr. Aston's homes. These roofs need to be maintained per the city guidelines. Mr. Aston might tell you that the extremely poor condition of his roofs, and we don't know why he waited 5 years before making these finishing repairs, warrants replacing them with asphalt. On the contrary, it doesn't mean that all bets are off when a historic home may have damage and defects, just as if all the wood siding on a home in Parkview failed, all of it, beyond repair and needed replacement. It doesn't mean that the siding can be replaced with vinyl siding, which is a non-approved substitute. Failed elements still need to be replaced with approved materials, as do these roofs. Mr. Aston might point out that asphalt shingles are listed in the guideline matrix as an approved roofing material. They are listed, but as a possible substitute for roofing materials that are no longer available, like asphalt shingles. They are not listed as an approved substitute for slate. Synthetic slate shingles are approved because they're significantly more affordable and visually indistinguishable from slate. Mr. Aston might tell you that he's invested in other projects in Parkview, and he never will again if he doesn't get his way. He has indeed invested his time and money to the benefit of Portsmouth. But individual homeowners have too. Likewise, they've invested their time and money in their homes and communities. They have all been required to comply with the guidelines, and most of them have done so without the ranting and disrespect that Dan Aston has subjected the HPC to on multiple occasions. They understand the guidelines apply equally to everyone. Some of these homeowners are here tonight.
Excuse me, there's a point of, yes.
Just a point of order. The appeals process is based on code issues, not I would say personal and sentimental type of issues. And if we could just stick with the
Absolutely
code
right.
issues and not bring in those tangential issues, that would be more appropriate.
Absolutely.
I agree. Thank you,
So
Dr.
the homeowners understand that the guidelines apply equally to everyone. Some of these homeowners are here tonight who have followed the city guidelines and repaired or replaced their roofs with the approved options. They knew when they purchased their home, as Mr. Aston knew, that they were required to follow the guidelines regarding the exterior maintenance of their historically significant homes. I am sure Mr. Aston will tell you that he has a financial hardship and cannot afford to repair his houses with anything other than asphalt shingles. This line of reasoning was presented to us over and over as the overwhelming reason for his noncompliance. We want you to know that almost 8 months ago, we gave approval to Mr. Aston to replace his roofs with synthetic slate options, and we approved repairs on his roofs, yet he persists in his arguments. From Mr. Aston's own statements, he has hundreds of millions of dollars to spend in Portsmouth, and he's declaring hardship? Recently, a single elderly lady on a fixed income came before us asking for permission to replace her slate roof with asphalt. It's tough sometimes, but we approach every case with consistency, and hers was no different. She complied with the guidelines like everyone else. That doesn't mean we're heartless, but your commissioners work hard to make our decisions consistently and without bias. Distinguished council members, finances can have no role in the successful maintenance of historic properties. Historic districts around the country refuse to accept financial concerns as a determining factor in their decision-making for the same reasons Portsmouth doesn't either. Loopholes, sob-sad stories, and economic hard times would eventually doom every historic district in the country to erosion and loss of their precious history. And can you imagine asking citizens to come before the commission with their financial statements and have us review them and decide who and who doesn't have enough money? It's a precedent we can't set. There is a process dictated by city zoning ordinance to make changes in the guidelines. That process is ongoing now, and we're considering roofing materials in some of the districts. But first, we must talk and get feedback from the folks in these communities. Overturning clear, established guidelines in a forum such as this evening risks undermining the entire systems of regulations and guidelines designed to protect our historic districts. Decisions made this evening could also affect previous and pending cases in unpredictable ways, and therefore I urge that we allow the system to work before making any premature and possibly emotional decisions tonight. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the City of Portsmouth recently spent a lot of money on an extensive historic district home roof analysis, and here it is. This sizable study concluded that the City of Portsmouth has some of the most moderate, reasonable, and balanced approaches to historic roof guidelines in Virginia. A few specific instances are 150 Webster. This is where Mr. Austin bought the home as he described as just awful, and as repeated in the minutes, he wanted to tear it down. I don't know why Mr. Aston again waited 5 years before making repairs on this roof. And again, 8 months ago, we gave approval to Mr. Aston to replace his roof with the permitted synthetic slate options, and we also approved, as recommended in our guidelines, his repairs of the roof at 150 Webster. At that time, we also approved metal roof replacement for the porch and other areas of the house that had falling metal roofs. At 1053 and 155 Nabel, we don't know why Mr. Aston let this roof reach such a state of decomposition before repairing or replacing it. Mr. Aston might tell you that his roof at 1053, 1055 Naval has a hole in it and it's deteriorating. Once again, he'll tell you that this degree of roof failure warrants replacing the roof with an unapproved material. Again, I stress, just because an element of a historic home has a partial or complete failure, it doesn't mean the guidelines no longer apply. Just as if all the wood windows in a home in Parkview failed, all beyond repair, and needed replacement, it doesn't mean that the wood windows can be replaced with vinyl, a non-approved substitute. Failed elements still need to be replaced with approved material, as does this roof. Our task in the Historic Preservation Commission to help interpret our city's historical guidelines properly isn't easy. It sometimes makes a property owner unhappy to hear that the guidelines will not let us vote in their favor. However, we strive for consistency in all of our decisions. With that in mind, we hope that Portsmouth will continue to benefit financially from its historical assets and preserve its rich architectural heritage. I urge this council to consider our statements and agree that we have made no error, which is why we are here tonight, in these cases, interpreting your guidelines. I would like to read the Parkview Historic Guidelines directly and let you know what the ones are that are specific to these cases this evening. Parkview Historic Guidelines, Section 4C, Inappropriate Materials. Do not replace a deteriorated roof that's historical with a material that does not have the same visual qualities as the original. Retain original or early roof materials such as slate, clay tile, or standing metal whenever possible. Keep as much of the original material as possible. Consolidate original roof materials to the most visible areas and use replacement materials on areas not viewed from the public views. Replace roof coverings when necessary, using new material that matches the original roof covering in composition, size, shape, color, and texture.
All right.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
ma'am. Let me, first of all, let me ask, can I see a show of hands from members of the commission that are here? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, thank you. Mr. Meeks.
Thank you. I got a quick question. If I go and build a new house in the historical district, do I get to use shingles or do I got to go back to slate?
Well, it depends on what historical district you're in, and if it is a new house, new construction,
New construction.
then you would submit your plans to the Historical Preservation Commission, and we would look at each item on there individually. We haven't had a new house yet. We have in Craddock, but we have not in Parkview.
Very good. Mr. Cherry.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you summarize for me the option, if any, that you all presented to Mr. Aston?
The options
Did you present any options to him? If so, can you summarize them for me?
Yes, the options that are in the historic guidelines, there are approved materials such as synthetic slate. It's a rubberized composite material that looks exactly like slate. And most of the homeowners here this evening who've had slate roofs, who have repaired their homes, have used this synthetic slate product. Several people make that.
Go ahead.
You can also repair your slate roof.
What's the cost comparison between that and the slate?
I would say that synthetic slate is probably half the price of regular slate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moody.
But once again, we don't consider financial costs.
I just want to know.
Okay?
Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening.
Thank you.
Talk to me about enforcement. Has the enforcement been consistent? In other words, are there any exceptions on the historic stock as far as requiring slate or faux slate rooftops?
Maybe I just want to make sure I understand your question. As far as enforcement, that's out of the Historic Preservation's hands. That's city enforcement, making sure that that's. You mean consistency
Well,
in our
not you
decisions?
enforcing it. Are you aware of any housing stock that have been in violation of the historic standards?
I'm sure there are.
I mean, as far as rooftops.
Specifically, I can't answer that right now.
Okay. Okay.
Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, in the code language that you read, can you read the language again? I thought I heard.
I'm sorry, in the. cold?
Right. There was the ending summary that you gave. You
The
mentioned,
guidelines?
right. You mentioned whenever possible, as far as
Yes.
the replace. Can I hear that?
Keep as much of the original material as possible. Consolidate original roof materials to the most visible areas and use replacement materials on areas not in view from the public ways.
Okay. And the question as far as new construction in that area, so if a new home is built, it would require a slate roof?
Not in Parkview. A home in Parkview that's new could have asphalt shingles. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Meeks.
Mayor, I was asked if Fred Brusso, because he handles the neighborhood advancement, because we had an issue 2 weeks ago with the Craddock community being inconsistent. I think Mr. Moody was going that way, but we didn't have nobody in the audience. I was seeing if
Okay. Are you going to try to retrieve him, Dennis? Okay. All right. Dr. Edmonds.
Yes, what would happen if, with the community or the status of the community, if they did use asphalt shingling?
Well, once again, it would depend on the neighborhood, and I guess you're talking about Parkview.
Parkview, yes.
Well, it's absolutely against the city guidelines, so probably the first thing that would happen would be someone would come out from zoning and say, hey, you can't do this, stop the work. When that happens, you have to come back before zoning and get the right material reapproved. So, once again, we can't go out and do it, but there are folks who make sure that you're using the appropriate materials in an appropriate manner in each of the neighborhoods.
I guess what I'm looking at is, would it decrease the house value of those that are
Well, in those
shingles?
particular neighborhoods, these guidelines were written based on the input from those neighborhoods. In 2008, there were extensive talks with all the civic leagues and residents, and they wanted these guidelines. They wanted these roofs preserved, and they wanted that to be one of the guidelines in their particular section. So that is why the city adopted those. They expect and hope to see that other homeowners will invest, as they have, because they put a lot of money into this and they want to see it maintained.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's go on to Mr. Ashton, and then well, Dennis is going to be the disadvantage now because he just walked in. So let's go on and hear Mr. Ashton, and then we'll get Mr. Bruce up. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Ashton, would you please come up, sir? And you have 10 minutes as well.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, honorable members of council, my name is Daniel W. Aston. I live at 958 Naval Avenue, Portsmouth, Virginia, in the Parkview neighborhood. I listened to the speech, and I'm not sure if I should just go through a rebuttal on some of these things, because I think, quite frankly, some of them are just outrageous. And I'm decided I want to do that, and with your permission, then kind of go through the context of some points I want to make. Number one, it's not against the city guidelines and the code to use asphalt shingles as a replacement material. The code says clearly that you can use materials whenever, you should use slate whenever possible, but doesn't say what's not possible or explain the definition of possible. And when you go to the matrix in the back, it says approved materials for Parkview for reef replacement, and asphalt is there. So is fake slate. All right, and it's interesting that the vice commissioner was talking.
Is that the same as synthetic?
Synthetic slate, yeah, something not. It looks supposedly the same. And so the issue, I constantly encounter going before this commission is they can't discuss economics. Obviously, you and I both have to live in economic worlds, but they say they refuse to discuss economics. The code talks about economics in light of the fact that hopefully it's good for the neighborhood. The code talks about economics on a lot of different issues. So economics are clearly discussed. And the interesting thing is the code also says, okay, you can do slate, and then they've said 8 months ago they allowed me to do fake slate. Well, you don't have to go before them to get fake slate. But fake slate, or false slate, however you want to call it, is interesting because that is an economic decision. They're already saying you can't afford slate because it's so prohibitive, that you can't afford it. So the code says, okay, we'll let you do fake slate. Well, guess what? That's almost equally prohibitive. And I'll give you an example. The first time I went before this commission, I asked, to do something else, and they said no. So I immediately appealed it to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission, or the Planning Department, and so the staff there asked me to go get estimates for what these roofs would cost, and said, go back to the commission, explain these costs. This is staff telling me this. So I go back, and what I find is, to put a slate roof on, I hired a slater, somebody that specializes in that, and I told him, I said, I'm not going to hire you to put a roof on, I just need your estimates. So a slate roof, $60,000. $60,000. A fake slate roof, $45,000. And you just go down until you get to the point of the asphalt roofs, which is what I put on my house in Parkview and the other 20 new houses I've built in the area. So we presented all that to these folks, and they know the cost. And the average, I called the city assessor's office, and I asked, what is the average price in Parkview? The average price of a home in Parkview today is like $161,000. But we've got to put a $60,000 roof on it. How do we build a city like that? And then I turned around and these houses, the three in question, are like $30,000, $40,000. I got the numbers here. So, they're a lot less than the average. They have to be restored. But let me just go through a real quick rebuttal. It was said that asphalt's not a modern, or is a modern building material. Actually, asphalt's a historical building material. It was around when Parkview was started at the turn of the century in the 1900s, and so it's actually considered a historic. Why I waited 5 years? Well, let's see. First, I got really sick, so that sort of took me out of action for a while. And then there was a market that just absolutely collapsed. You couldn't get anybody to come in. So finally now, we're able to convince lenders to come back, and their requirements are brutal, but we're able to convince them to come back in and allow us to restore these houses so we can create quality housing and we can attract new and young people to our city, and they can come in and rent the houses. The guidelines. They talk about the guidelines, and the assistance on slate is absolutely the highest standard. All right? But Parkview is not Old Town. All right? Everybody, I think, would agree Old Town's at a higher level of history and whatever. And so the guidelines are written to allow for some tolerance. But there's been no tolerance allowed in this situation at all. And you can go to that matrix again. It clearly says it's in the right of this commission to allow us to use these four, as four options. These are approved if the commission approves it. The vice chairman's claimed I've invested hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, I'm sitting back here thinking, I'm liking her better and better because I think she's from Texas. I never claimed that, and she's stretching the truth a little bit. I think the mayor at the two State of the Unions ago stated it correctly. It's somewhere right under $100 million that my partners or I have invested, but it's not hundreds of millions. Approvals. I did go before these commissions and ask for their approvals, and I agree that the code is written correctly, all right, because it allows for tolerance, but no tolerance has been shown here. It's absolutely, you're going to live up to the highest code, whether it makes any economic sense at all. And it's regardless whether we're building a city and trying to bring back, our young people to the city. It's like, you're going to do it my way, or you're going to go the highway. When they ask about why I waited 5 years, just in rebuttals, they said, why'd you go 5 years? Well, I told you two reasons. And they talked about this hole in the roof, why I didn't fix it. Well, I didn't fix the hole in the roof because the property was vandalized. And so, thieves got up there, stole all the copper, and it wasn't until, recently, within the last year and a half, we realized how bad it was, and then one day it just caved in, all right? That's why there's a hole in the roof. Let me just tell you a few things about these slate roofs, and I'll get to my sort of printed remarks, if you will. There's three houses in question here. There's a house at 68 Webster. 68 Webster's about 100 years old. What happens to slate roofs when they get to a certain age, because they used a certain nail, the nails start to fail, and they start sliding, and they become very dangerous. So you can't, it sounds good and reads well to repair the roof. You can't repair these roofs. You got to take them off completely, all right? Then you got to replace the plywood, and then put the new tar paper. Then you got to put a new slate roof on, all right? So the old slate roofs are very seldom usable because the holes have gotten widened, and there's a lot of breakage, and the slaters don't want to use those. So effectively, repairing these roofs is hard, if not impossible. And you can't go, unlike an asphalt shingle, and pick the one above it up and shove the new one in, because they break. I mean, they do not repair well. So that's 68 Webster. It's failing because of age. 150 Webster has the exact same problem. It's failing because of age. All right? 1053 Naval, the problem with that one is it's got this huge hole. Thieves stole all the copper out of the, where the eaves meet, the valleys. And I got a hole there you could drive a small car through, and there's pictures of it. So those are some of the issues we're facing, these $60,000 replacements. I went to the commission. I asked them for their permission to use asphalt, which we've used on virtually every house in Parkview. And, there's a duplex that we just finished restoring at 112 Warden, 14 Linden. And I went to the commission several years ago and said, I want to take the slate roof off that. And they said, okay. So now I think in the printed comments from the staff, they said, well, our reason for that was because you had an addition and some other reason. I forget what it was, which I never knew at the time. They just said, it's okay. You can take the slate roof off. I said, great. So we took it off. We got a new slate roof on this completely restored building, all right? And we just leased the first side of it. I'm so excited about this young couple moving up from Charleston. He's a nuclear engineer. His wife's studying to get her, master's in accounting. So those are the kind of people we're attracting. Then that's what they want. They want quality housing, and so they can live in close, because Parkview is a wonderful location. So the irony for me is that I believe in historical housing. I live in a house that's a replica of, has a lot of historical architecture to it. My home in Dallas was a replica of a National Trust home. I've restored historic farms. I mean, I get it. I've actually restored, there's 2 houses over there that has slate roofs that we deemed to be in good condition. And we went over and we patched and replaced them because the nails weren't failing. And so we saved two of those. To date, I've built 19 new houses in Parkview, including my own, brand new from the ground up. We're restoring or finishing up in a week or two 7 new houses. We got another 6 to go. At the end of the day, it's something like 31 houses. But I can tell you, if I had to go for this commission, and maybe this is, let me go back. When I got my house approved by this commission, they almost turned me down by a vote to 3-2 because they said the railings weren't the right distance on the front porches. Now, I don't know if any of you have driven by my house. I mean, I think it looks pretty good. It's certainly a testament to my commitment to the city of Portsmouth. And so you get in front of these commissions, and you don't know which way they're going to go. I'm just trying to be reasonable. I'm trying to build in Portsmouth. I'm trying to rebuild a neighborhood. And it's hard to do, because this commission's ruled take slate off this one, don't take it off this one. But the reality is, whether they want to live in a world of economics or not, I have to. So I can't sit here and fund all these ideas that they have, and I would tell you that it's more important to save the house than to save the hat, all right? I think at the end of the day, I told somebody it's like a patient that has cancer, and God
Thank
forbid.
you, Mr. Ashton.
But
Dan,
I know, I'm just
time
about
is
finished.
up. You need to stop now.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question,
Yeah.
or maybe to staff. Does somebody have a copy of those guidelines? You mentioned in the guidelines that show that asphalt as well as synthetic are approved.
Can I approach you?
Well, he can bring it up. Yeah, show me where it is.
I've highlighted it.
Yes, ma'am. You can bring
Guidelines.
that up if you got it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, please. Let him bring that up. Let her bring that up.
Yes, ma'am.
This is called an approval matrix in the back.
Yes, ma'am.
And it lists all of the materials that can be approved for certain areas. But it doesn't say specifically what they're for. That's in the guidelines that says specifically what each one is for.
So the approval matrix is for historic and general, or this matrix is broken down by Parkview.
Yes, it is.
So in the Parkview here, it has metal, artificial, architectural, and asphalt.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that those are all available for each and every home. Those are the list of all the ones that are in Parkview, not the ones that are available to be replaced on each and every.
So where do I go to find out what's available?
That is in the
Is that
guidelines.
street specific or?
That is in the guidelines, and that's what I read to you. It says specifically what product can be used when and where. So it's a combination of that, just like.
And I think Dr. Whitaker questioned that where possible. Can you show me that language that says where possible? Because that might be,
That would be under roof.
right here.
You can bring that up. So you've built 19 new homes, and he can build 19 new homes and don't have to put slate
Yes,
on?
because they did not have original slate on them. There were not existing buildings that had original slate.
Okay.
That's what it's
So if I were to do a panoramic shot of Parkview, I would see roofs of all different types. I would see a metal, a slate, an asphalt
You would.
throughout. Okay.
And here it is, inappropriate treatments and guidelines. And those are where you will read specific to roofs what the applications are.
Okay. Retain original or early roof material such as slate, clay tile, or standing seam metal whenever possible. Okay. All right.
Just one.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Preserve, blah, 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 blah. But back here,
How specific? That's the question.
Right.
yeah, well,
It's not how specific.
Can I also point out that I took those statements right out of the minutes. I
here's
did
the,
not make anything up
here's
and
the
I'm not
matrix
from
of,
Texas.
Okay.
All of these are documented in our minutes, every statement that he made.
It's in the minute. Okay.
Yes, it is.
All
That
right.
is
what she's
in
saying
it.
is.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah, here we go, wood, slate, metal, asbestos, et cetera.
Okay.
But it's, this is what the mayor just said. This says, these are all allowed. But the where, see, here's part B, it's allowed.
Okay.
All these types
Does anybody have any
Limits allowed.
questions for Mr. Ashton?
is next to this.
Okay.
When that is possible.
You can have a seat. Give us 1 second to kind
Okay,
of deliberate
thank
this, and maybe, Mr. Brusso, you were requested earlier when the first, when the actual commission were presenting, and I wanted to give you a time to kind of absorb what was going on.
I don't know.
It says whenever possible.
What's this?
We haven't come up with one yet.
I think it should allow.
Now, the slate roofs, he mentioned earlier about the nails. Is it that the nails are steel and they rust over time, and that's what causes the failure? And is he correct with trying to replace it? It's difficult to put one up, or can you speak to the repairing of a slate roof?
Slate roofs are difficult to repair. One, if you don't have an individual who's familiar with how to do it, they end up breaking more of the slate as they try to walk on it as they do fixing them. Same thing is similar to the asbestos shingles that are used on roofs. A lot of times when people go on those to try and repair those, more damage occurs. The fastening or the nails, in some cases, they actually used a copper bronze nail, and that was your high dollar installation. But a lot of times they used a steel, ungalvanized nail that really it's hidden by the layer as you nail over and then you overlap each roof. But over time, the moisture does get in there and cause those to rust and to slide. Once one's gone down, trying to get back and put another one in, at times is very difficult, especially if you've got some type of
Because you
pattern.
got to lift and tuck. And, okay.
You're trying to lift and tuck, and when you lift it up enough to try and drive the nail in,
You don't have room to.
you don't have room,
And
and
you
then
may
you actually,
damage the one on top.
and when you're lifting it up, a lot of times you will break the next row as you try to work on that, and it takes a very, very experienced craftsman to be doing those without causing more damage.
Now, is that skill set out there? I mean, is it readily available, or
It's
you've got-
available, but it's expensive.
Okay. Now, before you take it in, or before you answer any other questions and members of the council, talk to me about the guidelines. She showed here the matrix that show all of these as approved, and under Park View it does have them, but then she points to the guidelines that talk about. Can you explain why we have? Why is it written this way? I mean, it sounds like it's giving you latitude and the leadway to be able to do a combination.
It is designed to give latitude, and it's designed to where individuals run into issues to try and say, here's a way to preserve the historical integrity of the area. If you look at Old Town, that was brought up, Old Town has a tremendous amount of aluminum siding that was put up at a time prior to the HPC coming into effect, which is not what you would want to be seeing in your historical districts. It's not a architecturally correct material. The same thing with the roofs. The asphalt shingles were more in tune with what you found in the Port Norfolks, your Craddock's, and your Truxton, dealing really after the turn of the century, your 1900, 1910, 1920s. Parkview had a lot of the slate, had a lot of the metal standing seam roofs that were there. Some of the buildings actually had somewhat, maybe a flat roof. A few of those were there. So you had a combination of roofs that were there. Some of the older, the newer buildings built at the end of the beginning boom in that area actually did have some asphalt shingled roofs.
Beginning boom, what time frame you're talking?
I would say anything after 1920, 1930, okay. You would have found that type of shingles used more predominantly than you would of the slate.
Okay, all right, very good. Huh?
Aren't these buildings built in the 1930s?
Yeah, when were these buildings built?
Actually, the turn of the century, a lot of them was when the initial development was occurring. I would say, I think it's 1890, 1900, that era. So you had roughly about a 20-year period when the initial ones were being built that you'd have the slate and the metal roofs.
Okay. Dr. Whitaker?
Mr. Brousseau, the ambiguity here is in that language in the guidelines where it says that retain original or early roof materials such as slate, clay tile, or standing seam metal whenever possible. And it doesn't say wherever possible. It's saying when. So if it brings in when, that brings in additional considerations that a person could take into account, such as the economics. If it had said wherever possible, that would probably deal with a more location-specific type. So it's some flexibility there that I see in that language. That's why I was asking the commissioner to get to the code language, because that's what we have to deal with.
Yes, sir, I understand, the difference there. I can say, fortunately, in my case, with these issues, the code is specific in which it allows the staff of the planning department to have a tremendous amount of administrative authority that they did not have prior to the adoption of these regulations and these guidelines. If that staff cannot approve administratively the request that an individual brings, then by the code section it's forwarded to the HPC, or in the case downtown, the DDC. In that case, their ruling would be made, and it would not be staff, and then if there is a challenge to that, it would be before this body.
Okay. Mr. Cherry.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to ask Mr. Ashton a question, but before I ask it, all I want is the answer to my question. Okay? I want to ask you a question, but all I want is the answer to my question. All right? Can you come up?
I feel like Karnak, yes, no, or maybe, you know?
No. What is the anticipated sale price for these three places, these three homes?
Mr. Councilman, they won't be for sale. They'll be for rent. The renovations we do far exceed any sales price that's available. The house at 68 Webster will have to spend somewhere around $250,000, and we think when it's finalized, it'll be worth maybe $225,000. So our game plan is to restore all these houses, top to bottom, and to rent them until a later date.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Russo? Now, to my second point, in fairness, you mentioned that you had a citizen, an elderly couple that wanted to have some variance, and you didn't allow that. I'm huge on this fairness piece, and I don't want the perception or someone thinking because a developer comes in the neighborhood, he can get to pick and choose when and if he wants to use it, and a regular citizen or homeowner that wanted to do it, we said no. Now, is that because of the pleasure of this current board, or has it been consistent through time? Anybody came and asked for this kind of variance, you said yes or you said no. You can come up.
That's been consistent in the guidelines since 2008. And there are many homeowners here tonight, just that, not that single elderly woman, but many homeowners here tonight who face that same challenge. And they have abided by the guidelines, and they've either repaired their roof, or they have replaced their roof with slate, or they've replaced their roof with a synthetic product. And so we are very consistent. And economically, we couldn't say to her, I'm very sorry, you don't have the funds, we'll let you do this.
But did any of them challenge it to this point here?
No.
I mean, because
sir.
he's challenging the fact the language in here says whenever possible, and then here in the I'm looking at this introduction, it's got, in addition, you may find that there is an economic benefit for the neighborhood when a majority of property owners undertake successful and sensitive rehabilitation projects. So why does this thing mention economic benefit here? I mean, because I'm sensitive to that as well.
I understand
and if a homeowner wanted to do this, I'd be just as sensitive, because
Right.
clearly if the value of the house is only 160 or 200, we clearly,
Right.
nobody's going to put a $60,000 roof, no matter what the material is. You'd be looking for an alternative, or you would defer the maintenance until it either collapsed or the city or someone wrote you a violation and force you to go up and do something. And that's one of the concerns I have with homeowners that are doing the very minimum because of economics. And so when you ride through these historic neighborhoods, whether it's Truxton or Parkview, you see this, and it's really troublesome, because that's not what the intent was, to let someone get away with the bare minimum or do a patch job. So help me.
And I will tell you, that's why we do have a committee in place to review the historic guidelines where roof materials are part of it in some districts. But we're doing it by the book. We're doing it as the city codes tell us to do it. We meet with each individual civic league in those neighborhoods, and we talk to them, and we get their input, because they are the ones that wanted these guidelines enforced to begin with. It can affect their properties, it can affect them financially, and we can't just overturn the guidelines on a whim and say, you know what, from now on we can do this. We've got to talk to them and understand why they wanted those guidelines. Then we can make a recommendation to planning, and planning looks at it, and then if planning agrees, they bring a guideline change to City Council, and then City Council can decide to approve a guideline change.
Okay.
That's how that happens.
Thank you. Mr. Meeks.
Thank you, Mayor. Fred, I had a question. I got two questions for you. One, last week or 2 weeks ago, we had an issue, same issue, but in the Craddock neighborhood over a fence, and it came to that was about policing, and that it was inconsistency about how we're policing. Have we had issues with the roof portion of our historical policing also?
No, the code is unique, I think, dealing with roofs. Under the Uniform Statewide Building Code, the violation is it allows water into the building, not what the material is. So we're having to, the property maintenance code would be very happy with any type of shingle. But the zoning ordinance, which we also work with, says it should be of a certain material that is approved by HPC. So we would issue a violation notice. Now, if it's a rental property or we've received a complaint, very easy. But yes, you've got a leak, it shows up, it's leaking in the house. It's much more difficult to determine on an owner-occupied structure to actually get inside and see that there is a leak in the building.
Well, my question is, as far as these slate roofs, have we had a lot of policing, a lot of violations, and not following the code?
No.
Okay. That was one. Two, whatever our decision tonight, will that set the precedent for future decisions?
I think it will. It would be, a signal, or it would be a decision that says to HPC rather than the inspectors that they're not going to be backed up, so to speak, by council when the next appeal or next decision is made. If you choose to go with Mr. Aston, then I think that sends a signal. If you choose to go with HPC, it sends a signal. And the concern that I've got is that HPC is given already some flexibility by saying we understand that the slate roof is expensive, and we're allowing you to use something that's different than that, something that's cheaper, not the cheapest thing in the book.
Right, but also either we need to fix the language so we don't have litigation every time, whenever possible.
Ma'am, no.
The language probably, and Dr. Whitaker, thank you for that, probably needs to be looked at, and if it is something that we should fix, and I think the Planning Department would be willing to be including that as part of the packages they're bringing to council on a regular basis.
Can I ask the city attorney how the verbiage?
Sure.
Is that a
What, the whenever versus wherever?
yeah?
I can't really offer a legal opinion as to the verbiage of it. It wouldn't be anything that I could opine on legally.
Right.
But I do take Dr. Whitaker's comments to heart. They do make sense that there is obviously a difference in the whenever versus the wherever. But there really isn't a legal opinion I can offer.
Dr. Whitaker.
Yeah, just want to say, Mr. Mayor, that the council isn't here to back up HPC. We have to deal with the fairness of what's being presented to us, and it can't be a rubber stamp process because that would be unfair to the citizen. And so what has been presented to us is an issue of whether the language in the code and the guidelines allows for the owner to make the repairs that's being requested. I know the mayor hit the nail on the head when he asked the question, and I don't want the perception to go that we are treating people differently because I too want to uphold fairness. The homeowners that are here this evening as ones who have gone before the commission, they never appealed the case to city council for there to be an interpretation of the language. They went along with the ruling of the HPC. Now we have a homeowner who's challenging that language, and now we have to determine whether we agree with the homeowner's argument. But it's not a matter, I don't want it to be perceived that HPC comes here to be backed up by the council. We have to be fair.
I understand.
All right. Mr. Meeks?
I have one question for the lady of the historical. On your vote, it was a 5-to-1 for Webster, 68 Webster, a 5-to-1 for 150 Webster, and a 3-to-1 for Naval Avenue. What's
Yes, I can explain that. Some of the newer commissioners, when the information was brought out that it had a hole in the roof, they actually thought that maybe there's a certain degree of failure, and at that certain degree of failure that warrants being able to use a non-approved product. And so they simply thought, well, if it's that damaged, maybe he can. But I think that's because they were newer and did not understand the guidelines, that it matters not what degree of failure it is. There are approved guidelines.
Was all this done the same night?
Yes, it was. In 3 different nights, yes,
Oh,
sir.
3 different nights.
Yes, he came back 3 times.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
While you're up there, let me just ask, and this is these houses have been vacant for 5 years?
I can't answer that.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I do want to look at the economics of it, and if I'm trying to get these couples here from out of town with all of this diverse background to move into our city, how are we going to do that if economics doesn't play a role? And not that I'm asking you to violate.
No,
if you got a standard, you're going. I mean, how do we do that to keep up with the times to make sure? Because these homeowners here, property value clearly is going to drop if these houses remain vacant, if they're abandoned, if there's looting or all of the copper pipes are out. So there's got to be a middle road here, and that might be whenever. I'm an engineer, so I don't do whenever and wherever, but the good lawyer here does. But I mean, there's got to be some giveaway there. So, I mean, and some balance as to if someone challenges that and they come before us. I mean, I would apply that same standard to them if they came in and the economics wasn't there and it improved the neighborhood. We're talking about a neighborhood that we've deemed historic. And you can drive through some areas and you look somewhat third world. Is that fair to some of those houses? Would you continue want to have that?
I can offer two different ways for that to happen.
Okay.
One is, unlike some of the other cities in our area, Portsmouth does not have an economic hardship panel. And some cases that are presented as an economic hardship, such as Norfolk, can go before a particular group of individuals who can make that decision without asking the volunteer commissioners to make that decision in a meeting with other residents. In other words, don't bring your financial statements. So there is the possibility to set up a special group of folks who look at economic hardships individually. Okay. That's one way. Okay. The other way is to change the guidelines. And once, as I said earlier, we're looking at roof replacement in some of the districts to change the guidelines. But we're looking at that. We just started. We're getting ready to go to the different civic leagues and talk to those people because they're the ones who wanted these guidelines in place. And it wouldn't be fair to overturn that without talking to them. And if that guideline is changed, then yes, those new asphalt roofs could possibly be in place.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. And
okay.
I'm of the opinion that may be why there's a whenever in there to be able to cover that, which...
Well, I really can explain why there is a list in the back that is confusing. And let's say we're talking about siding in Parkview. There are many different kinds of siding in Parkview. There's asbestos, there's vinyl, there's wood, there's hardy board. And all of those are listed as items that you can use in Parkview on siding. And that's because if you have an existing building and it has vinyl siding, you can put vinyl siding on it. So in theory,
but it says
all of
here
those
for
are
vinyl
approved.
and aluminum, it's got an X, meaning no.
That I'm just using those as for instances.
Oh, okay. Go
it will
ahead.
list everything that's approved in that area, but it doesn't mean specifically that every roof can be any of those. If you have that existing asbestos roof, you can't replace it with asbestos, but you sure as heck could replace it with asphalt. So we had to list everything that's in those homes as an approved material because some of them already have that material on them. So the list is just everything that's there. It's not specific to what you have now. And that's very confusing, and I do agree with you, but it lists everything that's in that neighborhood. It doesn't mean that you get to use that if you have something historical.
Okay, thank you. That is confusing, but thank you.
And I think when you talk about the economics, maybe that's not the commission's charge. The economics and the politics of it should not be their charge. That is really why we're here.
Right.
So I think they should continue to, whatever happens here today, to follow the guidelines that they have that need to be fixed on. Yeah. but to follow them to the best of their ability, and let us do the economic politics part of the process to keep what they do pure. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I keep quoting Mr. Cherry, but I think it's just a really good line. I said this at the last one of these. The charge of all of these commissions, whether it's HPC or planning or any of that type of commission, is to follow the rules. And I think you all have clearly tried to follow the rules. If it was just a hard and fast rule and everything was, black and white, we wouldn't need a commission. We could just ask Mr. Brusso and Mr. Baldwin to do everything, and, you all could go home and fix dinner on Tuesday nights instead.
I'm going to start charging you right away.
Yeah, I know. But you're right. I mean, when you said that the first time I heard you say it some years ago, it's absolutely true. If you didn't have to use some common sense sometimes or look at the whole neighborhood or whether the house was worth $100,000 versus $500,000, we wouldn't need a commission. We wouldn't need any, brain power. And I do think that's why you're there. That's why the Planning Commission has to use some common sense sometimes. And when all else fails, that's why we're here. And we don't always follow our own rules, but there are circumstances where I think we will deviate from rules that we previously thought were the right thing in a blanket form. And maybe the blanket doesn't fit for every occasion.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, we done deliberating. Is there pleasure of the board, the council?
What's the question coming from the commission so we know how we...
Members of council, you have 3 appeals: 68 Webster Avenue, 150 Webster Avenue, and 1053 Naval Avenue. Each of these have to be voted on individually.
Correct.
You have an appeal to not have to replace the slate roofing with architectural grade shingles. Is that correct, Mr. Axton? That's correct. So you're voting on each one of these properties. Yes means you approve the appeal. No means you don't approve the appeal. Okay? So depending on what your motion is will depend on what you're doing.
I move in favor of the said appeal.
Second.
Okay, so Dr. Whitaker and Mr. Meeks. And this is a motion to approve the appeal.
Right.
And this is for 68 Webster Avenue.
Right.
So you're voting electronically. A yes vote is you approve the appeal.
Correct.
No vote, you don't approve the appeal.
Okay.
The first item is approved 7-0.
Okay.
Now we're on 150 Webster Avenue.
Okay.
Move for approval for said appeal on 150 Webster Avenue.
We have a motion and a second for 150 Webster Avenue.
Okay.
This item is approved 7-0. And now you have 1053 Naval Avenue.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you're going to be voting electronically.
Okay.
This item is also approved 7-0.
All right.
And that covers your appeals for this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of City Council will now move into the conference room. We have set it up where those that are interested in the budget discussion, if there's not seating available in that room, you can stay in here and it's going to be showed on the board to my right.
Okay, all right, we're adjourned for this portion.
Members of Council, you're now in session with Mr. Godfrey.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of council, first of all, let me say it's my pleasure and my duty to serve you as your interim manager. For having the confidence in me to do that. We have spent the last couple of weeks bringing back to you, hopefully, some considerations for reduction to the budget as you directed. We last adjourned on the work session of April 14th, that you wanted proposed budget brought back to you that would eliminate or at least significantly reduce proposed in that FY16 budget. So that's what we've been doing over these last. Tried to give you as many options as possible that you can consider. That's included further cuts by city operations. I say further because the budget that was presented as budget back at the end of March already included some cuts to the operational needs of our city functions just to get it to a balanced budget with a 17-cent tax rate increase. So you made clear what you wanted, and we've tried to give you as many different options to consider. And these are hard choices. as we discussed a couple of weeks ago. These are hard choices. None of them or choices or recommendations that I would make, but we're trying to get to a balanced budget with a minimum tax rate increase. A lot of these decisions go beyond just impacting FY16. We've tried to present in your spreadsheet there a number of options for reducing the general fund budget in FY16, showing what the tax rate impact would be, and also showing what the impact on services would be. But these are just shown as FY16 impacts. Some of them will have continuing impacts. And to eliminate the tax rate altogether, or to eliminate the tax rate increase altogether, just compounds some of the tough decisions that we'll have to face in putting the FY17 budget together next year. Whatever you deem as an acceptable increase, that will help us next year. But I think there's got to be some balance between having a revenue base that meets the demands placed on the expenditure side of the equation. As I mentioned when I conveyed these to you, freezing all vacant positions to a point in time, that was one of the things that was discussed a couple of weeks ago. That doesn't have the full value of savings in FY16, that you can't equate the full value of those frozen vacancies to the same amount of a reduction in FY16, and that's because we already build in a vacancy savings into the budget. In FY16, in the general fund budget, we've built in $2.4 million. So whatever the amount of the complete vacancy, frozen vacancies, is the real additional cut to the FY16 budget is only the amount over the $2.4 million.
So when I see here on that line item you're speaking of $1.6 million savings, is that in addition to the 2.4
that's in addition to the
that's baked in? So if we froze everything, we'd be looking at $4 million. That's correct. Basically. Okay.
But the only additional savings would be the 1.6.
Okay,
right.
I got it.
Finally, again, I said we tried to put as many of these things on the table for your discussion tonight. We put on the table or in the list the items that you asked for at your Monday, April 13 work session. Put on there the items that were brought by the city manager at the Tuesday work session, and then finally the piece that we've been working on the last couple of weeks are the items that we've gotten offered from department heads, from constitutional officers, from appointees to add to this as further cuts. And so they're all on there, and we stand ready to go through them however you'd like to proceed.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, what I'd like to do is, like I always do, be very liberal with however and whoever wants to jump in, but I'd like to give you some kind of idea. First of all, let me thank you for doing this. I don't think this is exactly what I asked for, and I thought I had a consensus here to go back and get a cut across the board from all the departments and tell me what those impacts are. So, and what I was looking for was if in engineering we said it was 7% or 8%, and if that's a $10 million budget and that equates to him getting 9 instead of 10, then that's all he's going to get. And I wanted that director to share with you, to share with us, what would that $1 million do for his or her department. But what you have here in enumerated is in a similar format. We're going around to be able to pick and choose that. So this is good. But I wanted to see what that across the board impact did, and let them come back if it's services, personnel, future work, or cutting out part-time versus contracting and those types of things, which you tend to get when you go to a person that's managing an apartment. You know where your opportunities are to be able to absorb that type of cut without doing some of the main core things. So I thought, and from council, is that not what we were asked for?
Yeah, that's what I thought we were going to receive, something other than just the straight line item issues that were presented here.
Okay. Okay. And then what? Yes, sir. Well, I've got several items. What I want to do is I'm going to start it off, taking the privileges of the mayor, and then we can go around the room. And first of all, I want to send you in the direction that I'm going, so you can have, or your staff can have some idea. The item here on the fire and rescue, is there a reason why we did not move the police and fire into the new 801 building that we purchased? And I thought our rationale for buying that building was to combine those two departments to have and realize not only the savings and the opportunities to be able to develop the partial across the street with the rest of our downtown piece, but to get the fire department out of, I believe it's 355 Crawford, with the enormous fees that we're paying over there. Is there some reason why only the police department is over there now and not both?
Yes, sir. Early on, we talked about having both public safety admin functions, at least, in that 801 Water Street building. But as we started to look at the space needs for the police department, we realized there wasn't enough space for both, and that the space needs for the police station.
So how do you make that determination, though? I mean, because I'm thinking if council says, yeah, we're going to jump into our reserves and we're going to spend this amount of money and we want to do it for both, I'm thinking you, the manager, would go to the police chief and the fire chief and say, there's your building, you guys figure out how to get it done. So how do you come up with it was just enough room for the police department? Because I think if my bosses tell me, here's where your house is, and you two guys figure out how you're going to split it up, they'll find a way to get it done. Was that done?
We did an evaluation of the space needs of both functions, and in order to consolidate as many police functions as possible, it necessitated use of the entire building.
Yeah, you can jump in on it. Yes, sir.
I think your points are well taken, because, you know, I originally had umbrage about purchasing that building, but when I was convinced that we were going to get both of those entities in there, I went along because it would save us some money. Right. Now we just own another piece of property, non-taxable, on the waterfront. Right. So I think the council needs to, whatever's going on over there now needs to be stopped. We as a council need to go take a look at that and decide what we're going to do with that building from this point on, because it's not doing what we paid the taxpayers' monies for. And so it might be time to revert. We made a mistake was made, or we were misled. Put a for sale sign on and put them back somewhere else, because we're at a point where we just can't afford to be owning all this real estate in non-taxable. Well, and not getting what we thought we were getting out of it. We're not getting the savings that we thought we were going to get.
I understand, and that's why again the win was both departments, and the long-term view we all know is to be able to keep a developer or keep that out of a developer's hand. So if we are trying to maximize our opportunities here in this city to be able to bring more revenue in from a developer perspective, that building and this building, as well as the jail properties and all the other ones that are going to come up for availability, would be more attractive. And to not own that would be a travesty during a time that we had an opportunity to do so. But the short term, meaning first 4 or 5 years, was to merge both of those two departments in there to be able to get that savings. And so I agree with you, and that's where I'm going with that. We need to stop whatever it is we're doing and get both chiefs to go over there and walk the floors and find out how they're going to split that up. What areas can they use from a commonality standpoint, whether it's conference, training, and all of that, because I'm not convinced that we're a city of a size that we can afford to pay for all of those separate type things. That's the kind of thing I think the taxpayers are looking for us to question, or if they come and ask us, then I want to make sure we get from staff the rationale why we need to have the fire department somewhere else with some of those same things. Because I think in the same building, co-location allows for a lot of those types of synergies. Yeah, you'll argue over who's in the conference room, but everybody has a schedule where you check it out and use it. And training facilities, not that they're both the same, but there's some similarities that if you got one area for training that you can, both of those can figure out how to work that piece, and we get a bigger bang for the buck. Dr. Whitaker?
Yeah. As we move forward and looking at the particular numbers, can we get a consensus that I thought we were there last meeting, that we're not going to touch education, that we're going to leave it as funded. Before we move forward, can we just get a consensus on that?
I'm not willing to touch it. I mean,
And I think we can do it without touching education. I mean, we handed enough out on April the 13th to do that.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Mayor?
I mean, that's for the pleasure of the entire body, and if we got some that want everything on the table, I mean, I can respect that, but
That's kind of what we said. You said all hands on deck. You said we were going to look at everything. And then we also got to look at how much money they're returning back to the city this year, you know, and their incumbents.
okay.
Yeah,
We can touch that subject.
I'm not in favor of taking anything off the table at this point.
Okay. All right, let me finish.
I was just saying that I was saying a consensus. It didn't have to be a unanimous. But I did have a question on the CIP.
Okay. Can I finish mine?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you opened up.
No. I brought that first item up. My other piece here is...
Can I address one more thing before we leave that?
Sure, absolutely.
We're substantially along relocating police functions into that building, and we've put a lot of time and resources in doing that. And it wouldn't make sense at this point to stop and reverse that, besides the fact that we've vacated buildings and moved people from those buildings to this. My suggestion would be that we look again, if there's a consensus of council, we look again at any available space for fire administration, but not that we hold up reverse course with relocating the police into that building.
I hear you, but that's going to be a council decision there, Brandon.
Yeah.
And I be, and I'm careful about telling me I don't make sense. Okay.
Again, that's, yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to say,
We can't tell him his job. He's already started.
I was under the...
He works for us.
I understand, but he's...
Maybe you can't tell him, but I can.
Well-
As long as he works for me.
Okay, well,
The vice mayor has the floor.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We agreed to purchase the building. When we agreed to purchase the building, it was for a joint use. I believe it was the very next meeting, as soon as everybody in Fire and Police Administration had looked at the building, it was clear there was not going to be enough room for everybody. In fact, it sounded to me like it was going to be a shoehorn to get police in there.
When was that articulated to the council?
I'm going to say the very next meeting
I don't
after
recall
the
that.
decision. It was in this room.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, there was even some discussion, I believe at that time, whether it would be prudent to look at moving the fire department out of 355 Crawford into any other space we might own, like the recently acquired building that the EDA purchased over on County Street. I mean, I'm not dreaming this, but I would agree, we've already vacated space to make available for police. You know, if there's some way to coordinate, you know, meeting space or some of the upper echelon of the fire department in some offices that make sense, fine. But Lord knows we were already pretty far down the road. Chief, aren't you already working in there?
Third and fourth floor are occupied at this time.
Third and fourth.
Correct.
How many floors in there?
What do we have, many floors?
Five
floors.
Okay. So all I'm saying, we need to look at those other floors and see what goes in there. And maybe the fire chief gets a corner office with a window like the police chief. That's all I'm saying, Mayor.
No, I agree.
And we need to take a look at that.
No, I agree.
Well, has there been any collaboration between the fire chief and the police chief?
what the mayor asked earlier.
That's what I asked earlier.
Utilization of the building?
Where's Chief Barkley? Have you and the chief gone in there and walked those floors? And
I walked with my staff.
Okay.
Staff walked in there first. It came up.
But has there been joint discussion with the police department?
So you just walked it and looked and that's got to take place.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then secondly, that's my first one on the police and fire using that joint facility. The second piece I wanted to get into talk, if you could, and And looking at the leased property here in the list that we got with the rents and all that we're paying, and that piece on Crawford where the fire is, we're paying almost $95,000 a year to lease that piece. And the square footage there is 7,806 square foot. Now that building has what kind of square footage? All 5 floors total what?
50,000 altogether, isn't it?
Outside measurements is 55,000, and then each floor has the bathrooms, elevators, utility rooms in the center. So that depletes from the 55,000 outside measurements. So it's about 50,000, I believe, total.
Okay, and see, that's why I'm having a little problem, because your square footage and what the police department has didn't equate to the 50, and if he's only in now 7,800 square foot, clearly we can find the square footage in those 5 floors to be able to combine both of those departments.
But that didn't include the police that was in city buildings already.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm saying all of those, still we're talking 50,000 square foot, and he needs this. Now, who made the determination that we would put the fire department in the facility off of Airline Boulevard? I never heard of that until we talked about the Parks and Recreation, and when I found out that first building that we had over there coming online was to move the senior station. So the next question that I did not ask in public, because I thought I may have missed it, is who decided that we need to move the senior station over there so we could put the fire department in that building? Because to me that doesn't make sense, but somewhere there was a discussion or someone made that determination. I wasn't aware of that.
It was a staff discussion. Certainly there are going to be a lot of immediately usable spaces at the Pines, the new facility. And that seemed to be a good match for the senior station, and so that just vacated that building on Clifford Street, making it available for fire admin. And the chief, I believe the chief, the city manager, Dennis, probably some others were part of that process of evaluating the Clifford Street building for its adaptability for fire administration.
And what is the square footage of that building on Clifford?
About 5,000.
About 5,000. So we're paying for you to be now in 7,800, and you can get into 5,000. So you're even making a better case for me that we ought to be able to find 5,000 square foot and 5 floors to be able to get them in there. I mean, you're making this easy. Anyway, okay, and so that's an issue for me, and I think, again, we start talking about these costs and costs that are incurring on a continuing basis, and when you don't take advantage of these types of things now, you're going to be paying for this down the road with relocating and doing all those types of things. So I think Mr. Chair is right. We need to stop and look at that right now and be able to get the fire on at least 2 of those floors, and there's a 3rd floor that they can share or something of that magnitude.
Is there a security issue?
I have no idea. I mean, that's what they need to.
I mean,
those 2 guys need to work out that and the manager and come back to us, but because we purchased that building for almost $4 million. Was it 3.7 or 2.7?
2.8.
2.8. We spent almost $3 million in that building, and that would be a huge bang for the buck if we could get that done in there. I don't know how that runs out, and I know you don't realize a lot of those in the first year, but the run out here could be real beneficial. All right, the next thing I want to run
Mayor, before you leave that,
yes, sir.
so you're saying that the chief of the fire department and the chief of police need to get together and
walk
see how
that
they
building.
can.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're telling them to do now?
Yeah, the manager has to do that. We can only direct the manager.
Direct the manager.
I would like to see those 2 walk that building and see how they can co-locate and make sure they get everything together.
do you see any security issues that we're going to run with the work of the police?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you without getting into it.
Okay, and before we leave that, there was at one time I was informed that we were doing some work over in the old Civic Center jail. I mean, the old offices for the police and fire. Have we spent any dollars over there doing any renovating where the old courthouse used to be?
I'm going to have to look to Dennis
Is
on
it?
that.
Have you been over there? Somebody told me that, and I was baffled when I heard that because we never authorized or never got briefed with doing that.
There's some discussion to moving the magistrates into that location. They've got to move out of the basement. We've been working with the regional supervisor of magistrates, and we've been over and looked at that. We also have looked at the possibility of moving pretrial services, which is a grant-funded organization through the Sheriff's Department, into the new piece of the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court, which is the glassed-in section, because they would need to
In the new courthouse or the old one?
The old courthouse, because they
We're
would
trying to
need
come
move
out of that building, not go in. Is that not our plan? We need to be coming out of that building so we can
You're right.
put that out for development. So bringing anybody in there and adding anything to that is...
That's why we built the $80 million courthouse.
Well,
It's only been discussion at this point, and we've
okay,
not made
so no dollars or man hours has been spent doing any work in there?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Before you leave the Fire and Police Administration, it was mentioned in the last meeting that the new Truxton Fire Station was supposed to house the Fire Administration. So is that a budgetary issue? In the narrative of the budget, it mentions that as part of the project. So if we're talking about putting it there, does that have a budgetary impact, since you're talking about locating it either here on the waterfront or in some other buildings?
It would. Let me ask the chief and Nita if they know the answer to what was planned for that CIP item, because it is currently programmed in your FY16 CIP for implementation.
Is that bond funded?
And it would be debt funded, and of course the debt service would not affect the operating budget until FY17 and years subsequent. So
the cost of building a new fire station in Truxton would be about 50% of what's in the current budget now if the administration were to move an 801 water. So it would take the cost down to about half.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It would take the cost of what we have in the budget to about half. It would be about 50%.
Could you build a smaller
We
building?
could build a smaller building. Yes, the administration would not be in that.
I
that's
actually
still
wanted to put
bond
that up for
funded.
discussion because I don't think that's an issue that we need to be tackling now. I think that whole thing can be delayed, that whole fire station there.
But it's still bond funded, and it's for, it would affect us in our future reoccurring debt, 2017.
No effect in this budget.
This budget at all.
One way or the other.
Right.
Okay, the second piece, can you walk me through the constitutional officers, and I'm specifically honing in on the sheriff because of the report that we received, I think from you a while back, showing that it's costing us about $1 million this year for the sheriff's department and the sheriff in particular not complying with the agreement that we have with the other cities with the regional jail. And we're under contract, and we're anteing up for 250 beds, whether we use them or not. And I think the other cities have their same portion, and we have not used it. And I think from the data you showed, it's costing us about $600,000 at the regional jail for us not using them, and then we're paying an additional $400,000 to house those same people over into the local jail that we have next door. So it's cost us $1 million. Is that a fair statement based on the data that you provided with us, Mr. Manager?
yes, sir, and that's based on the current year's utilization, the current fiscal year's utilization, which is averaging about 207 inmates a month at the regional jail, and of course the number that we pay for is 250.
Right.
So through the end of March, what you're doing is really adding two numbers to get to the million, but looking at them separately, what we've spent on those unutilized beds at the regional jail is about $670,000 through March. And then, of course, if you took the same number of jail bed nights and you applied the local only cost for the city jail, that would be a little over $300,000. But you can add the two together for the sake of argument, but one's more theoretical and one's actual.
I understand, but if I'm covering, if I'm covering the cost at the regional jail and it's costing me this, and all we have to do is send the individuals over, if I'm sending over another 38 to 40 to get to my 250 threshold that we've agreed to with our other partner cities, then that in essence, in turn, will give us savings to the city and the taxpayers by not housing them over here, correct?
That's correct. There will not be the local only cost to house them in the city jail.
Okay. All right, Mr. Wood.
How about the per diem? What does that take in consideration of the per diem that we lose?
No, it only takes into consideration the local only cost of the city jail.
Well, what's the number with the per diem that we would lose in doing that?
You mean what is the number of what is the per diem that we're not?
Yeah, because the per diem goes to the regional jail. That's not shared with us.
But it keeps the per diem low for all the localities that are.
I'm not talking about the localities. I'm talking about Portsmouth.
Right.
I'm not interested in the other localities. I'm interested in Portsmouth. What does the per diem? What is the per diem amount, and how much will we lose? Because that has to come out of that figure.
Right. Well, we also lose a state per diem when we don't house. We get a state per diem for every inmate that we house at the regional jail, and we're not getting that. When we have 207, we only get 200, whatever that per diem is, and I think it's.
Colonel Jamoki's right here.
Okay.
Yeah. Why don't we ask?
So we're not getting that amount at the regional jail.
Okay.
If we had 250, then we would get, that per diem for every one of those 250 at the regional jail.
So back to his point, how much are we losing? The 40 that they're not sending over there, we're losing that times the per diem is what we're losing from the state.
That's what the regional jail is losing from the state.
That's what and which is why our partner cities, the other four, now a fifth city, Chesapeake, that's joined, is a little upset with Portsmouth because we're not honoring our end of the agreement, but we're paying it. Correct?
I don't know how the other cities feel. That's another conversation.
All right, good. So explain to me. So there's $1 million that we're paying.
There's this question.
What's that?
I don't think he's done.
Who's done?
Bill?
Oh. Well, my question is,
Well, you asked him the question, and he wasn't finished, and you just took over his question.
I got the chair, Mr. Meeks. Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the follow-up question to that is, we pay for those bids no matter what.
That's right.
Whether they filled or not. Mm-hmm. But the per diem, once again, due to our action as a city, as a member of the regional, the per diem will be transferred to the regional. We won't get that per diem.
That's correct. It goes to the regional jail.
Well,
that's state per diem.
Don't you think we need to be grounded in that number before we just throw out an arbitrary number that's $1 million in savings?
All I've done was compute. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. All I've done is compute what we actually pay for that we don't.
Dollar earned.
Okay. All right. Let me get back to my line. So we're at $1 million is what it's cost us this year. Now we have not been at the 250 bed level since when? About 2010.
We were consistently at the 250 bed level through FY10. I only have data going back. I could get it, but I only have data going back to FY05, and we stayed right at the 250 average on an annual basis for that period through FY10, and then it dropped in FY11 and has stayed well below the 250.
So for the last 5 years, we haven't complied with the agreement of the 250 bed.
Well, it's not a matter of being out of compliance. It's a matter of we're paying for something we're not using.
Well, the other compliance piece is the sheriff I'm speaking of. We honored an agreement and we're paying for it whether he uses it or not, and then we're paying for it again because he's asked to keep them over in the local jail. That's the number that I'm trying to get to. So if it's $1 million we spend in this year, and it's been doing that for the last 5 years, and we know the per diems and all of that fluctuate, but still, so you could say we've roughly cost us about $5 million over the last years of the sheriff not complying with the agreement that we made with our partner cities. Okay? Yes, Ms. Simmons.
I think you're wrong on your number,
Okay.
all of you, because you're not factoring in the state money that comes to the city of Portsmouth when the prisoner is in the Portsmouth City Jail. There is a per diem from the Commonwealth of Virginia to the city of Portsmouth when that man is in the Portsmouth City Jail that you're not factoring in. And if that man's not in the Portsmouth City Jail and goes to the regional, we don't get that money anymore.
That's the per diem I was
Isn't that what you were trying to say?
referring to.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the number I was looking for.
Okay.
That's which I think we need to have to make this a fair conversation.
Well, and I do want to make it fair, because where I'm driving at is the local match and what we're spending with the sheriff's department. And I've got major concerns. I see in our budget here, if I go
$5 million.
It's about 6.5. The total local match to the sheriff's budget is $13.5 million, and of that 13.5, about 47% of that money comes from the local taxpayer. So we're footing about $6.5 million of that $13.5 million sheriff's budget, correct?
For next year's proposed
next year's budget.
And Judy's been trying to get my attention. She has the number of the state per diem that is collected by the city sheriff for the city jail. Is that correct?
Right. The 400, the number that we're paying for having them in the local jail includes the cost of that per diem that you mentioned. When they do their cost allocation report, they report all their state income, all their local income, and they come up with a per diem for what it costs for the local jail. We only use the local portion of those costs to attribute to what it costs to keep them in the local jail instead of the region. So that per diem is already included in that number.
Meaning?
You lost me. Say that one more time.
The per diem is attributed to where they are located. So Portsmouth Jail gets a per diem for every prisoner they have there. Okay, that's part of the revenue that they get from the state and the local. All the expenditures are listed in their cost allocation report. That comes up with a per diem that they have for the local jail.
That already nets out the state money?
Yes.
Or includes the state money?
They have a percentage of what is local cost. The local cost is the only thing that was included in the number of those people who are not going over to the regional jail. So it's already netted out.
So we are costing $400,000 to pay them here.
It's just the 400. It's not the
Right.
million.
Right.
We would be paying that 600,000 already because that's part of the contract.
Right.
It's the 400.
Right. So we're paying the contract with the other cities, which is the 6 that's not being used, and we're paying a 4 for the keep them here in the local.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I thought. So we, the city locally, use $6.5 million is what our local contribution to the sheriff's budget is. And if you go to that page here, well, before we get there, if we go to page 7.2 in the budget, you show the staffing here. And for the sheriff, it shows 189 positions. And when I go to the state compensation board and download what they're authorizing to the city of Portsmouth Sheriff's Department, it's 161 positions. So we're funding 189 versus 161. What does that mean, the 161? Is that the state saying, in order for the sheriff in the city of Portsmouth to function, here are his duties and here are the positions that we're going to fund, and here's the amount? Is that correct?
So Duffy has an answer.
The state funds by area of positions that they authorize for the jail. And they have their court service people, they have their court security people, they have the jail people, and they have by category. The ones that are not, that additional, what is it, 28?
There's about 27, 28
27 positions. Those are the ones that we put in here when we opened the new courthouse.
It's 15.
A couple years ago.
It was like
They're all,
15.
other than the one of
18
them,
more.
which is a maintenance position
Sure
that
did.
we've had in there for a while. The rest of them are to provide court security and transport of prisoners from the jail to there. Those were all added 2 years ago or 3 years ago when we opened the new courthouse.
Yeah.
And we're
All locally
paying
100% funded. The state
all
will not pay for
100%
those.
funding. The state's not paying for that. So,
Not paying for it.
so the state here, this comp board here with salaries and everything, is it a fair assessment to say the state's saying, here's all we're going to pay, and here's all we think the positions that need to be filled for that department? And they do this for all the constitutional officers. So they come in here and they list a budget and a salary by category, from the sheriff all the way down to the lowest deputy, and then they give a number of compensation board positions of 161.
That's all the state will fund.
And that's all the state will fund. So is it fair to say does the state factor in that is sufficient to be able to do their function or not? I mean, I don't understand why would the state, if it's sufficient for them to do their functions at 161, then they should be able to do it with 161. I'm not asking for your opinion on that. I'm trying to determine the state compensation board for our constitutional officers, and when they come up with this formula and this cost, they deem this is sufficient to be able to do the function of that constitutional office.
Of what they will pay for.
Of what they will pay for.
What they will pay for.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay. Yes.
question though, but does that formula take into account the capacity and also the duties that are to be performed? Because when they look at the number of positions they're going to fund, do they take into account the capacity of the jail, and this is the number of personnel needed to run the jail, to take care of those other services? Is that included in the formula?
We do have a complement based on the usual number of prisoners, the usual number of service court papers that they have to serve. There are workload standards that they use, and there have been instances where they have frozen positions at the comp board and not given to us if they have funding issues. But yes, there are standards that they base those on.
Okay.
They have a certain amount of security that they pay for the courthouse. If we wanted additional security, which is what was decided a couple years ago, that's where the local positions came in.
So the state defines, here's what, one guy here is a secure site, and if we say, nah, we don't want one, we want two, then we pay for the second one. But in the state's definition, one is suffice.
That's correct.
Okay.
So it does look at the total capacity and duties necessary, needed for the city sheriff's department when calculating that formula.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So if it were to be decreased, it wouldn't impact on the capacity and the services that are going to be performed
Well,
from the state perspective.
but the state is not paying for the transport from the
Right.
jail to the new courthouse, and the state is not funding the additional security that was
Right.
deemed necessary for that courthouse.
Right.
So, but that is
Because the
something
desire.
that city council
Approved.
approved.
Okay,
So
right.
it's something that council was,
Okay.
So the state didn't take that into account as a minimum, and we just added on to that.
the state gave us the minimum, and yes, we added on to that.
So it did take into account the transportation, but we added
Not the
to.
transportation,
Okay.
not the transportation.
Because we built the new courthouse.
Because we moved the courthouse
Security
with it.
they have.
Nor some of the security, or these security.
Nor the size of the
Increase.
courthouse.
Right.
That's right.
Side of the courthouse. All right, now, back to the compensation board here. The salaries that they list here are the salaries that they deem a necessary structure for that office, or those positions, right? So we pay a supplement. We, the city, gives the sheriff's department a supplement. And how much was that, Brandon? The supplement, did we ever pull that number out?
We did. For FY16, the local dollars would be $6,337,000 of the $13.5 million total sheriff's budget.
So
that's
that's the added positions that we have here locally.
Plus the supplement.
And
for
the
other
supplement. And the supplement is for definition purposes. What is a supplement? And what's the purpose of it?
It raises the compensation above the base pay by the comp board.
Salaries.
Right, understand. So, and we provide that to the sheriff in a lump sum. So is there a formula that we use if I go and see a deputy that's been here 3 years and another deputy that's been here 3 years, they could be making two totally different salaries because it's at the discretion of the sheriff as to how he distributes our local money once we give it to him. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I can't tell you how that supplement's calculated. Somebody else,
can anybody talk about the compensation
HR or
board?
finance staff may be able to, but I can't.
There's some supplement that's in there that was attributed to the increase after 1 year of service. I can't remember the exact terminology for that. That is given to somebody after a year of service. But the majority of the supplement, there is a lot part of it that is at the discretion of the sheriff as to how he distributes it. Some of it's based on increases as the city's gone along and put money in there, but yes, the sheriff can make changes to those.
You can make changes, okay.
How much is that supplement? How much is that supplement?
It's $6.5 million for the added positions as well as the supplement. So if you back out 18 or 28 positions, and the delta of what the fully burdened rate there is what you would be giving the sheriff in addition to what the state pays him. And then he can distribute at his discretion whether he want this guy making 10 more thousand or her making 20 more thousand, and it's all up to him. So there's no standardization as to if I'm a deputy with 5 years experience, I would be at a certain scale, similar to our folks. Our folks have a scale, and you got increases in the levels we at. None of that exists there other than what he has and then his discretion with the supplement that we give him, correct?
I don't know how he does that. I can't answer that.
But of that 6.5 million, the court security and transportation is in that also?
Yes.
Okay, so when you back that out, how much is left for this discretionary salary amount?
I'd have to get that number for you. I don't know the answer to that.
The 6.5 is just the local cost of the whole budget, 47% of the budget. A lot of those line items the sheriff is required to have to maintain the jail. A lot of the major contracts like medical, food, are lump sum contracts. So sometimes it doesn't matter if you have 400 or if you have 415, you're still paying some of those costs. So there's some discretionary lines in his budget, but it's not 6.5. That's the local share of the whole budget.
Right.
That's everything that we're putting in at the local tax.
So what I'm asking is, you mentioned earlier that that supplement includes the transportation and also the court security that the council requested. Now, what I'm asking is, when you back that out, what's left for the sheriff to pay the supplemental salaries to, or to supplement the salaries for the deputies and himself?
Dr. Whitaker?
Yeah.
If you turn to page 1814, back your budget where we have the sheriff's expenditure detail. 18-14. And if you look at 6 lines down, you see allowance, other supplements. That total of 405,683 would be the amount of supplements to compensation.
What line was that, Brandon?
It's a combination.
Which
Carol, speak up.
It's both of those two lines.
Which two lines?
The allowance dash other and allowance dash other supplements, plus the benefit cost associated with that additional salary.
That's the compensation. That's the local compensation piece that we're paying to the sheriff to cover salaries in addition to what the state is covering.
Yes, just as you do for all the constitutional offices.
Right, okay.
So if I add them up, that comes up with benefits roughly about $1 million.
No.
No,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
500 and
500 plus
It's the
400
three.
plus the 100.
It's the three lines.
No.
Yeah, you're adding all the benefits
Yeah.
there. and
Didn't you
you
say the
can't add
other?
all the, you can't add all, some portion of the benefit.
The other, which is 141,000,
Okay.
In the 405.
the 405, 683, and then whatever benefit costs are associated with that amount.
Is that the 566 there that goes with
That's
that?
That would be on all the
That's all
salaries.
of them.
Okay, so you got to break that out. Okay, got
It's
it.
540 plus benefits.
So it's 540 plus.
You can hit 24% in that neighborhood and get you're gonna get another $100,000.
5 4 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that answers my next question, because on the front of that, when you had the breakdown here on, I think it was 8.
You're going back to the number of positions.
Now, trying to get to this.
The first number you directed us to was page 7-2, which were the positions, and then
Yeah,
summary
7-Eleven.
is 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven has a
7-Eleven.
rolled up, and we have salaries here at 6.7. I guess I've tried to back into this number because the state comp board shows a salary of their approval of 5.5 million, and then we show on our line 7-Eleven salary line item of 6.7 million. So there's about $1.2 million addition on the salary piece, and then the allowance piece there. Would that be also, Carol,
Those are the local allowances that we pay.
the local allowances, and then the benefits? That's total, the 2.5. Then what would be the other operating expenses that comes up to 2.5 million? And then internal service charges that come up to 1.2 million. What would those?
So the
two
other
lines?
operating costs are everything from the contractual pest control line on page 1814 all the way down to parking fees.
Hold on, let me go back to the 18. Okay, go back again. I'm on 1814.
So starting with object code 521205, contractual pest control,
Okay.
all the way down to 559050, parking fees. And then below that is the internal service charges.
Okay. I'll come back to that so we can get somebody else to ask questions. And my point here is, if we're gonna make cut, and I know we've added positions and there's been rationale to be able to do some things in the past, if we're gonna go in and make cuts, we gotta evaluate and know what these additional positions are and what value that they're benefiting the citizens, and whether or not we want to continue those before we go cut something that we're already doing in general services or waste management or somewhere else where we always get the explanation where they help. I got a prisoner on the truck and he's free and all those types of things. I just want to kind of nail that piece down. So that's it on the judicial piece and the sheriff, unless somebody else want to get on that, because the other one I wanted to get was just to state my...
if we can get a breakdown of the contractual other, could we get a breakdown? Or
the contractual other, where's that line? What page are you on, Danny?
1814. It's about halfway down.
905.
The million too.
That's their medical cost.
That medical
That's
cost
the
is
medical
1.2.
1814.
Line 905.
Like hospitalization or whatever.
And that number could be diminished. I think one of the things when I went over to the regional jail and they talked, and one of the things they applauded was that medical facility they had there, and how most of the other cities are putting their folks over there, and the ones with the worst medical cases are there because they're able to handle that there. So if we don't send our prisoners over there that have these worst case medical conditions, then we're paying for that line item here, correct?
That's correct. Those medical costs are frankly not proportionately shared. Some cities have more sicker and more higher needs inmates than we do, and so therefore we're to some extent subsidizing their medical cost. And we've talked about it at the regional jail. We've talked about breaking that out on an actual use basis rather than dividing that up by the number of inmates and just a straight portion of the per diem. But we haven't advanced.
That would be a lot fairer to each locality, especially from our standpoint. If we're not using it and they're blending this rate for all 5 of us, since we're all in this, and our sheriffs decide not to get involved with that, we're paying for another service there that we're not getting. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, all right, I'm about to wrap up. The only other thing I wanted to just put out there was the freeze I'm in favor of, and I don't know, I wanted to stake my pieces out there on the freeze. I think Councilman Cherry had mentioned that, as well as the, where's the vehicle piece? I think we had vehicles being driven home. Which line item was that? We're back on your spreadsheet here.
No costs.
Number 51.
Number, what, 51?
Oh, 204, I'm sorry.
That's cool.
Yeah, 200.
Yeah, right, okay. $264,000 is what that take-home program is costing us. And I am in favor of stopping that program. All right, and before I turn the floor over, I had one other piece on HRT. If you go to the HRT line item 88 on your matrix, we've got cutting the HRT services to maintain level funding, meaning, and that's going to net us a 340, line item 88. On page 6 of 8, are you with me, Bishop?
Yeah.
Page 6 of 8, line item 88, we're going to net $349,000 by cutting the services to maintain level funding. Explain it. Is that a modification to existing routes, or this is an increase, what they brought in this year, our share of an increase?
The request this year for our same level of service, more or less, there were a few tweaks to service hours, but on the whole, the same level of service was going to cost us $349,000 more. So if we say we're not paying that for FY16, we're going to pay the same level in FY15, you can just through a extrapolation figure that we're going to have to reduce the service hours. In other words, cut the times that those buses pick up across the board by 12% to accomplish that.
Okay. That was the point of what I was making there. If they cut if we tell them we don't know what to cut, we're going to tell them if we agree we're not going to swallow this increase, and then HRT will come back and say, well, if you want to stay level funding, and in order to be able to accommodate you, we're going to have to modify routes 41 and 27 and
yeah, and they then consult us on that. I mean,
right.
They wouldn't just arbitrarily do it.
I understand.
They'd ask us, all right, you're going to pay us this much less. Where do you want to reduce your hours of service?
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Yep, Mr. Moody.
Where do we stand on the overcharges, the $600,000 overcharges from HRT?
No, that was all settled.
Yeah. What did we get though?
We got a dismissal of the claim, and we got a number of benefits that are to accrue over the course of the year.
I haven't seen any of those. They come to fruition.
Advertising and things like that.
Well, things like that. $600,000, a lot of money. We need to be updated on what we're getting for that.
I can get you the status.
A fair question.
Did they pass on a like increase to the other member localities?
Yeah.
So everybody got a
yes, sir.
Yeah. Same across the board?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I mean, not the same amount, but just proportion to whatever their service.
Whatever their service, yeah.
Our total pill is about $3.5 million, and I think Norfolk may be at the $20 million, and Virginia Beach.
They got equivalent increase.
You got the light rail over there, and then Virginia Beach has a lot of other things. They actually are helping us with the fleet because they're installing that trolley piece downtown, which is freeing up some of those newer buses to put in the fleet, because we got a real fleet aging problem. And you might have saw on the news the other day, we're ordering quite a few buses to try to compensate for that. But I just wanted to understand that cut and be able to understand what you were saying here on the 12% piece, because I'm not opposed to making that cut either. Mr. Weeks.
Can he touch on 105 for us?
105?
Yes, 7 of 8. We don't have enough adequate parking for this, or?
Yeah, figure that out.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's what he's saying.
There are a number of impacts in eliminating the take-home car program. Certainly, response times and making this an attractive place for police officers and other public safety officers to work are two among them. But another is, if everything is a fleet vehicle, we have to have a parking lot to accommodate both the fleet vehicle and the personal vehicle. And that would be a challenge around here. It would be doable, but you'd see a lot fewer available spaces around City Hall if you eliminate the take-home car program.
Talk to me about response time. How does an officer or a firefighter who's off work and got our car in Windsor, how does that affect response time when there's somebody else on the night shift or the day shift? What does he get to do with responding?
Let me ask the police chief first, because he has a larger number, and then the fire chief.
Okay, that'd be fair. Thanks.
There are a number of positions within the police department that are either collateral duty or on-call responsibilities. So there, in the criminal investigations component, there's homicide detectives, there's robbery detectives, and what have you, that if an incident occurs during non-business hours, they're actually called back in. They come in their vehicle and they respond right to the scene. Without the take-home car, they're coming to police headquarters or wherever the car is going to be parked, getting out of their car, getting into the police car and responding. Same thing for the other collateral duty and emergency response capabilities, such as SWAT teams, members and negotiators. They have to respond back into Portsmouth or from their house in Portsmouth to wherever the cars are located, get their equipment, get in the car, and then respond. So that accounts for delays in response.
Okay.
Our community policing unit, if there is a major event in the city, it often happens that we recall community policing officers to come in and start handling calls for service. So once the officer gets in his car, they're actually signing onto the radio that they're available to handle the next call for service. While taking the vehicle, take-home vehicles away from them, that's not going to be the protocol. They'll have to respond from their house, get to where their police cars are, get in the police car, and then go in service from that point. So you will experience delays both in emergency response capability, the investigative capability, as well as the backfill during an emergency situation where we need additional personnel.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I had a question on page 1, line item 2. You have the CIP, and that's $786,141. The question is, why is that a cash issue and not a bond issue?
I can answer. The reason is that we have a number of projects that we do that are maintenance in nature, but they're expensive maintenance, like replacing HVAC systems, elevators, and those types of projects really are not good candidates for bond funding. Bond funding should be used for a project that has a useful life that's at least equal to the amortization on the debt service. And in the past, the city had been using bonds because they were cash-strapped to pay for a number of projects that really should have been paid for with cash. And most cities dedicate, and particularly cities of our size, dedicate a lot more in cash-funded projects from ongoing tax revenue than what we do, because the other side of that, obviously, is the impact on our debt rating, and we have to pay the debt service costs on that. So, cash funding projects is...
Okay, so if that's the case for West Haven Elementary School roof, is that the entire roof, or is that a section of the roof?
That's the entire CIP funding for that roof project.
That's the entire roof? So you don't expect, how long you expect the roof to last?
I can't answer that question.
But I'm just saying, it's not going to, you're not going to go back up there, in the next 5 years and replace it. That would seem like that would be something that is a long-term expense that you would put in a debt, in a bond versus cash.
In my experience, things like roofs are not typically done through debt financing because they're considered to be more maintenance. And again, the city shouldn't be debt financing everything in the CIP to begin with.
Well, this isn't everything. This is just some of the projects. I'm looking at, for example, the roof. That's almost $1 million. And if the formula is for projects that tend to last the life of the amortization, this would seem one that would be eligible for that.
Be a candidate.
Yeah. I mean, you might define it as maintenance, but that's replacing a roof, and that's just not your typical maintenance job. I would think maintenance is more of a short term.
Doing patchwork and things like that.
Just to follow up on your question, we did put a roof on Norcom not long ago, didn't we?
That's correct.
$900,000.
So why is this roof costing us almost as much as the roof of Norcom? I mean, there's a vast difference in the size of those roofs. So
West Haven is much smaller.
Much smaller. So why is it costing as much as the roof of Norcom?
I don't know.
Is it slate?
Don't go there.
I doubt it. That's right.
Well, you got half the building and the same cost. Not adding up for me. So
This was the number that the school provided. The historical number was a little bit
There you
less than
go.
this, but this is a recent number that the school provided.
So we need to revisit that because that sounds like that'll be a few $100,000.
We need to see the estimate.
Well, either way, it sounds like that would be something that
Or
would
estimate
fit on the bond instead of our cash, regardless of what that.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that part. I know the Norcom roof cost about $1 million, and they were talking about the same price, but.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
I'd like to get back to the take-home cars. I know, Chief Hargis, when you first came here, one of the first things you recommended was eliminating take-home cars, and you and I jangled on that issue. I know there are an awful lot of citizens and a lot of business owners who want those police cars sitting in their neighborhoods, sitting in front of their businesses, in the middle of the night or in the middle of the business day, so that it provides at least the appearance of added security. I would like to seriously consider taking the manager's recommendation to consider a policy change with restrictions instead of eliminating the program altogether. For the very reasons that the chief recommended, it might also be a way to incentivize these officers to live in the city. I am all for keeping our police cars out of Windsor and North Carolina and all these crazy places y'all keep talking about. But as an incentive to a tenured officer to live in the city, I think it makes all the sense in the world.
I'd be willing to entertain that. I mean, from a percentage perspective, because that is the community benefit you get. But when you're on 58 and 460, and all of them are getting out of here like a bat out of hell, that's a whole different ball.
And that was the majority of our issues was.
That's exactly right.
But you want that car across the street from your house.
Right. Well, I got a gate.
Right.
I'm just kidding. But that was most of our issue.
That's
man.
right.
Was coming back because I was coming back from Windsor and called the city manager and said, we have a police officer live in Windsor, and he said he will check and find out, and we did. So
That poor officer has become the poster child of take-home vehicles. I agree with the chief. I think response time is a major factor, and it's unrealistic for a policeman that's called into duty to go get out of his personal car, switch cars, and try to respond in a timely fashion.
Yeah, well, I don't want the officer that lives in Churchland to have to come down here and get the
I hope
car,
they don't call the guy
turn
from
around
Windsor.
and go back.
Right. I hope they don't call the guy from Windsor to come get me.
Yeah.
If I'm in trouble.
Me too.
Don't call him.
In 2009, there were policy changes to the point where if you lived outside the city, it was only to and from your house, and the vehicle only could be used for official use only. So that was one change that we did put in place and kept in place in 2009. So if the car did go outside the city, it gets parked at the officer's house, and the only time they could use it is to come back for official business. So that did reduce the cost.
Maybe you need to tighten up that circle a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think we need to set that policy to eliminate it. They either, if they live here, I can.
In the city limits?
In the city limits, I can swallow that one, but no. And I think we got somewhere we had a report that had the percentage of those officers that did not live in Portsmouth. Was it 40, 50%? What was that number? Do you remember? I think it was when you did your presentation, you had a slide that showed us that percent. It was like a footnote.
I did research for you afterwards, and off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what percentage it is.
Okay.
But not every officer has a take-home car as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. Yeah, Dr. Wood.
Also, we had discussed the equalization rate, I think, Mr. Cherry.
I was about to bring that up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But before we get to that, I did mention the fire chief. He does have a take-home car, too.
Yeah,
You
right.
might mention the impact of that as well. Sorry, but didn't want to completely leave
No,
the
that's
subject
good.
without.
We want to make sure we cover all bases.
We have 3 positions that use take-home cars, which is mine, the 2 deputies, because we respond on fires.
Mm-hmm.
And they carry EMS equipment in their cars. If somebody's out next door gets sick, they can start right then. Right. We can get people in. The only other car that we have the fire marshals that's on call. They also have a take-home vehicle. In fact, this Friday, May 1st, we have a policy that's going in place. All the vehicles that people that have vehicles that were out of town, like our training person, those vehicles are coming in, and they just use them when I approve them.
Right.
So that's our policy that takes place.
But there's one fire marshal vehicle, and you use it this week, and I use it next week, and then the next fire marshal uses it the next week. It rotates with the job.
One vehicle, they drive their vehicle into it's housed at their closest fire station. They come in and get the vehicle and go to the scene.
Got it.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Whitaker brought up one thing I was going to bring up. We talked, and it's not on the list, but we talked about that 4 cents for
$4.5 million equalization.
For equalization, and I don't see it on the list. We talked about that, which is 4 cents, and we also talked about the risk management fund. Risk management, there's a $2 million increase from the actual to this year, and that is another 2.9 cents on the tax rate that should be on this list. That's not on here. And I thought every department was bringing something back, but I don't see anything. If maybe it's in here, I missed it.
Can you speak to that?
Let's talk about the equalized tax rate first of all. The 17-cent increase includes 4 cents for equalization.
Where's it at?
It's what's in the proposed budget.
Where? I mean,
on this list is what he's talking about.
No, not necessarily on that list either. Where is it at in the budget? Which is the same question I had last time. Yeah. Where is it at? Are you putting it in some fund to build it up? Where is it at?
It's in the tax revenue.
Yeah.
So if you look at the revenue line for real estate taxes and for the FCC.
Okay, tell me what line.
You'd have to go to the revenue detail and look at the real estate tax rate.
It's in there.
And it's into that large number.
So go to page 18-63. The first line, taxes, real property / current. That includes the full revenue from the 17-cent proposed tax rate increase.
Okay, so why do we need that in 2 cents for flat income? That's 6 cents.
Because our revenues overall are flat. Meaning that it's not just real estate that's flat. We're not generating.
One of those got to come out. We don't need. You got equalization of tax revenue, which you're saying is flat revenue. Then you got provide funds for normal cost increase, which is flat revenue. So if that was the case, why don't you just make it one item for 6 cents?
Just to try to distinguish between the real estate tax rate equalization and the other revenues that are flat.
Okay, so
explain the equalization again. Why he's doing that? What is the equalization?
We're going back to assess values to prior to FY08.
Well, no, it's actually to when assessed values started to decrease, the rate was never equalized, meaning the rate was not adjusted upward to provide us with the same amount of revenue. So what we are proposing here is to equalize the revenues back to their 2010 level, which other localities, James City County is doing the same thing. They're planning on increasing their real estate tax rate by 8 cents, which is almost 11%, to equalize their tax revenue back to 2009. And other localities have done that as well.
So if I'm paying $1,000 a year for my house, and then in 11 the assessment dropped, and so now I'm only paying $900, you're saying we should have, as a city, recalculated to get that additional $100 to keep the citizen at $1,000. So the citizen actually was not paying the same amount, and because we haven't done that, we need to bake in this number to be able to catch up with that.
That should be against the law.
Yeah.
It's called living in your means. I'm not I say you, Carol, when I say that, but by golly, if your income drops, you cut expenses.
Well, the reason we didn't
you
put
live
it on
within
here
your means
was we cut expenses. This is an illustration
Yeah,
of
but
all.
yeah, but you're
didn't show it.
But
We didn't show
you're
it.
putting it back in the budget. That's not cutting.
Okay.
Exactly, Bill, and your point is well taken. You adjust your budget, you adjust your spending to match your income, and we have done that for the last 5 years, and now we're going to go back and put it add 4 cents in it,
and 2 cents to boot. 6
so
cents.
6 cents.
Yeah.
I think not.
Yeah, I agree.
And the other one was, so I think that's 4 cents right there. 4 or 2, 1 or 2. We don't do both, in my opinion. And the other one was we added $2 million to risk management, which no one could explain to me the last 2 weeks ago. Why? Because we don't what the catastrophic thing we think was going to happen in this year. So we need to take that. That's 2.9 cents.
Well, let me. I'll take one shot at it, and then ask Carol to back me up. It goes back to the issue of appropriating fund balance. So if we don't, you're assuming that if we don't reserve that fund balance for a particular use, that we ought to be able to plow that back in as revenue on next year's budget. You can do that. You can, but it's not advisable, because what you're then doing is using fund balance for an operating level in your next year, and that, the year after that, you've just compounded the problem, because you've then, without cutting expenses or expenditures, you're just adding revenue that should only be used for a one-time purpose.
You were just adding revenue to the risk management fund when it doesn't appear to be needed. According to our last CAFA, you had $8.1 million in there, and we only had $395 that we used in actual expenses in 14, and now you want to bump it up to 5.8.
So why is that number being padded?
It's not, and let me explain. I think what Mr. Cherry's question was he was looking at the actual expenditures for fiscal year 2014 compared to the budget for 2016. And one of the big items that we need to take into account every year is the estimated cost of our open claims that are likely to be paid out. I had our actuary give us an updated estimate, and we are going to be having to make a $5 million adjustment to our liability, and the offset to that is going to be to the expenditure line.
That's self-insured, right?
Correct. We are self-insured for both workers' comp and for our liability up to $1 million, which means our insurance company doesn't pay us or pay anything towards those claims until we hit that level. And that's a prudent decision that the city made, because we can afford to take on that risk. We pay more if the insurance company takes that on for us. However, when we have years, which we have had, and Ms. Cordell can probably weigh in on this, you can't look backward when trying to estimate what's happening with your claims cost. You need to look at what the open claims are, and the actuary estimates that our combined liability is going to be over $17 million. So we're actually going to have to use fund balance this year in order to book that adjustment. And all the other costs in there are for the cost of buying the insurance, which has gone up exponentially over the past few years, particularly for our property insurance. And I should also note that it was just a few years ago when the risk management fund balance was negative, which was a problem and was brought up at the rating agency discussion. So we are providing for a risk management fund that adequately pays for the expected costs that we have throughout the year. That fund also pays for the cost of any outside attorneys that have to represent us when we have legal claims, and so that's the reason that we're looking forward and looking at what is happening. And when we have employee morale issues, then our workers' comp costs are going to go up, and we pay out over $2.5 million every year just in what the city pays in workers' comp costs. And I should also note that fund is not all general fund supported. It's an internal service fund, so that cost gets spread out to all of the departments in the city, including the self-supporting funds like the Public Utilities Fund.
It's still $2 million that if we got sitting in the fund balance, it's still ours to use whenever we feel like it. So we don't need to add 2.9 cents to the tax rate to cover it.
So you're saying that addition is based on the actuarial formula?
Well, the budget itself actually went down. We reduced the budget overall for the risk management fund. But I believe Mr. Cherry was comparing the fiscal year 14 actuals to the fiscal year 16 budget. And the big reason that the actuals were lower that year is because in that year our liability went down. And so when we reduced the liability, we put a negative expenditure in. But that's just that is a 1 year adjustment and our liability has been going up ever since.
Is this including the backstop for the schools?
No.
Health insurance? Where's that?
That's another 2.8 that's hanging out. That's hanging out there.
That's what I thought you were asking about.
Sir?
That's what I thought you were asking about.
Yeah. That's not what she was telling me, though. Because
we're talking about on page 1861, the total risk management fund.
Because that's part of the answer I got to this question last time, and now I got a different answer tonight, and now you bring the 2.8 back up. So it's all
different money.
Yeah.
Let's go back. 1861.
Yes, sir.
Right, where are we at?
So if you look at the total budget for 15, it was $6,032,611.
Where's your line item? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. On page
119.
it's the risk management fund total. It's just above the health insurance fund.
Okay.
So it's going from over $6 million to $5,876,000. And it would not equate to 2.9 cents on the tax rate for a couple of reasons. One is it's not all paid by the general fund, which is where the tax increase resides. And secondly, we know, based on a report done by our actuary, that we have some big claims costs hanging out there that we're going to have to pay for, to the extent that they are underneath the amount that we self-insure for.
I asked about those 2 weeks ago. You didn't tell me about them, and now you're telling me you got them, but you're not giving me. Okay, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Is this risk management or is this insurance claims?
Risk management includes all of our claims costs.
Because.
And it also,
because 2 weeks ago you told me we were putting this money aside to be prepared for something that might happen, and now you're telling me you're putting it aside to pay for some insurance claims you know are coming.
Two different.
That's what the risk management fund does.
But you didn't know. Now you know what's coming already. So.
We asked our outside actuary to update their estimates. We normally do this once a year at the end of the fiscal year, and we asked them to do it early so that we could address your question.
How accurate have they been in the past?
As
accurate as somebody who's a professional actuary can be.
They generally overestimate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what. So you don't get caught short and come back and want to shoot them. So you look happy because you got more instead. That's what they do.
While we're on this line, where's the backstop for the schools? Which line item is that?
That's not in the risk management fund. That's part of your general fund balance.
Okay.
The 2.8.
And how is that looking? Have we talked with the schools as far as forecasts? What are their?
Well, they're not quite 4 months into the first year of their self-insurance. I would say it's too early.
Okay. Now, what do we got placed? Our placeholder is what, 2 million?
2.8 million.
2.8.
Did we figure out where it's sitting at? Because
it's in your fund balance.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but they got your answers this week.
No, they don't. Because in general fund balance, that's how much money? It's just stuck in there somewhere. It's
2.8 million.
Because you said 2 weeks ago that we had to keep it. We had to keep it on the side. To keep it out here so we'll have it in case they need it. Now you tell me it's lumped in with everything else, which means it can be spent any time. So it can't be both ways.
That was John.
So if we're saving it for them, it got to be sitting somewhere.
I think John mentioned
It's in general fund balance.
Yeah, well, that was a long discussion that we had. It had to reside in someplace.
Someplace, and we still don't know where it's residing. So because if it's just sitting in your general account, it's not being saved for anybody. No. It's sitting there to be used with the general fund.
It's designated. When we gave you information on how much fund balance was over and above your 15% policy limit, we took that out of the total so that you didn't
count. Left us with the 3 million or whatever.
2.8. Well, no, yeah, the 3.5 million was over and above your 15% policy. Now, you could, if you want, take that 2.8 million, move it over to the health insurance fund, and have it sitting there so that there's no question that that's there to backstop claims. But we don't know whether we're actually going to even need to use that. Another option would be
that was my question.
If the schools end up with a surplus at the end of this year, you could take all or a portion of that surplus, put it in the health insurance fund and designate it to pay for any claims over and above what they estimate, and then that frees up your fund balance for other uses.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yes.
When we started this meeting, the mayor, we asked for a 7% across the board. And if we would get to 7% across the board, that would have gave you a number of X. And then I think we would have been able to start from there instead of beating up every little 2.9 here and 4.5. Because the equalization, I do agree, we hadn't done it. That's a big savings right there. When it comes to these risk management items, I mean, the risk assessment, they do go high, so they look like they're the smartest people in the room. But I really think we need to go back to the 7% across the board, and then it'll be our decision what we cut, what impact it's going to have on the city, because it's going to be us to answer to the citizens. I know, probably like y'all, my phone hadn't stopped ringing about the 17 cent. Don't cut this. Keep this in place. And for us,
can't go to church or go to the bathroom without somebody asking you about it.
Grocery store. But I think the 7% is huge because it might be a windfall of money that we could look at having. What was that? A windfall of money that we could then decide on what services we cut. Does the sheriff need the extra 10 employees, or do we have, golf course stuff? I mean, you did a good idea of this, but I think it's a huge windfall of cash at 7%.
I don't know how you get to 7%. I mean, if you take $11.7 million, which is the amount of the tax rate increase, and if you apply it to all the general fund, it may be some fixed percentage, but right. There's not 7% in non-departmental
right.
or risk debt service
I mean, you just, because you can't say, well, sorry, debtors or bondholders, we're not going to pay you at 7%. So it's, I don't know what that percentage is, but it's not something you can't do across the board cuts.
Right. I was saying in your departments, not as far as your debt service and your bond. I mean, we don't want to do nothing to affect our bond.
And I think the simplistic version that I put was, if we got $11.8 million gap, divide that by everybody and then come up with a number and then go to everybody and say, tell me what this impact is, because council has asked that we cut you by that amount. And whatever that amount is, it closes the $7.8 million gap. And then we can decide if we're not going to cut the police going home cars or whatever, but he's got to say, okay, if he's got to cut $2 million and they're driving the cars home and he'd save his workforce, then he'd offer up to you, okay, we're going to cut out the take home and leave that from here. I think what you did here, it skipped a step, because I think we eventually going to get down to the weeds.
Right.
To this,
yeah, we tried to do the hard work for you.
Yeah, no, I understand.
It's a lot easier just to say, here's the bottom line. Look, we're going to take 7% off the bottom line. Anybody can do that math. We tried to do the prioritization of services and give you options, that are based on priority services.
The equalization, that doesn't, if we don't do the equalization, it doesn't affect us nowhere, correct? Bonding or the way they view us, or...
No, it just reduces the amount of tax revenue we get, because we built in the equivalent of 4 cents of a rate increase.
Except that you'll have to cut services. And maybe if I try to restate
we go to 21.
If you take out, there's certain non-discretionary items that we have. Debt service, for instance, is 15% of our budget.
Right.
We have to pay ARC for our closed retirement plans. That's another 3%. The regional jail costs. We have local shares of state functions, such as social services, BHS. We have a certain portion of the budget that's being paid for with fund balance, so that doesn't have any impact on the tax rate. The state mandates local portions of the constitutional offices. By the time you take all of that out, that's over $92 million, and that does of our $242 million budget, and that still doesn't take into account. I mean, if the schools are not on the table, that's another 22% that comes off. We also have a number of functions that are supported by revenue or revenue producing. So if you cut those, you're going to lose the revenue, and then you'll just have to do more cutting. It becomes a death spiral. But if you take all of that out, and that's not even counting all of the revenue supported positions, I'm just counting the tax revenue supported positions. You've got a remaining budget of $93 million. To cut $11.7 million out of that would be 13% of the budget, and that includes public safety. So if you took out public safety, you'd have to cut 32% of your budget to cut your way out of this shortfall, and that's going to be detrimental to the city, because you can either make tough choices and invest in the city, which could increase our assessed values and ultimately then increase our tax rates, or if we start cutting services and making the community less attractive, that's going to continue to put downward pressure on our assessed values, and then our tax revenue will be even lower next year. So it's,
the equalization piece, to make sure, so we don't put the 4.5, we're going to add that to tax rolls. Is that what you're saying? I mean, the tax increase?
It is added in tax increase. It's 4 cents on the tax increase.
It adds, I think what you're asking adds to the gap.
It adds 4 cents.
Because they already have it in the budget. It adds to the $11.4 million.
So you're at 21 and a half? I mean,
No.
4 cents is in the 17 cents. So if you say we're not doing the 4 cents,
that takes 4 cents off the 17. That drops you down to 13.
4 times $680,000 we got to cut out of the budget.
You kind of confused me what you're...
No. I'm saying the same thing I said 2 weeks ago, and they just gave me a different answer than they gave 2
But
weeks ago.
the impact there is what? If we take that 4 off, Carol, then what are we doing? What's the risk with not doing the equalization?
That's $2.8 million roughly we got to cut out of the budget. That's 4 times $685,000.
85,000.
So the total shortfall is 11.7 million. And either through cuts or additional revenue, we need to close that gap. And I think it's also important to note one item that was listed in the cover memo from Brannon is we already cut $5.2 million out of this budget before it even got to council. We had requests from almost every department in the city that were, and the vast majority of them were needed resources, and we couldn't fund all of those. I mean, we had to pare that back. We cut the equivalent of 8 cents on the tax rate out of the budget before it got to you. So, you know, when we look at cutting, we have departments that have been cut for years, and they just, and there's never been a realignment of service expectations with those cut resources. And I mean, the departments are struggling just to provide the basic services. And if we continue to cut, we're going to have employees who just aren't going to be physically able to continue to provide the same level of service. And so it's somewhere along the way, we've got to make an adjustment for what can realistically be done with the amount of money that's being given to these departments.
But that goes back to being the right size organization for the right size city, and whether or not we need all of those things. I mean, that lends itself back to doing another efficiency study, which we did probably some 7 or 8 years ago, that showed a whole lot of positions we did not need, and we trimmed those things down, which is how we got to where we are now and got the health of the financial health of the city back in line. But again, it was addressing the structure and a lot of the things that we had here that probably wasn't popular, but what was needed. And I think that's over 8 or 9 years old now, so it may be time to take another look at that, because you can't just have a structure and everybody every year asks for more and more, and the city's not growing and all that. Somewhere you got to tell them not only no, but hell no. But yes, sir.
Well, to the point of an efficiency study, I think it is time, and I understand the school board is thinking about doing the same thing, so I think it'd be good to share that cost and do a joint efficiency study, since we're merging some services together anyway.
And follow that up with a forensic audit of all our finances, because these numbers are jumping around now. I don't know who can figure them out. So we need to do that too. Can we go to 3-9, Mayor?
Yes, sir. 3-9.
I'm at the very bottom of the page, Ms. Swindell. Is this $983,000 for new vehicles?
I'm sorry, which line item are you looking at?
I'm at the 3-9. I'm on the capital improvements funds, fleet management. Fleet management, $983,908. What is that expense for? Is that for new vehicles?
That's for replacement vehicles, and that doesn't even cover the needed cost, which is more about $2.5 million a year.
What vehicles are we replacing, and if it's something we can put off? Somebody asked me what vehicles we're replacing.
The majority of that $983,000 is replacement of public safety vehicles, and we've got some vehicles on the road in excess of 130,000 miles. So
well, they just getting started.
30 less than mine.
Which is another one of the things when you cut that program out with all these vehicles going all around Hampton Roads, you'll cut that cost in half.
Exactly.
That's a lot of wear and tear and why you got to balance the decisions that if this guy's on call and all that versus forking this kind of money into replacing.
And that's 1.43 cents on the tax rate. $983,000.
And you say this is primarily public safety vehicles? $1 million?
Yes, sir. Our 5-year replacement plan, actually it's a 10-year replacement plan, reflects about $2.6 million a year to maintain those vehicles in mileage and year range that we agreed on.
Yeah, that's a line item.
So that's you're driving for another year.
That's right.
But you do understand that our need is $2.6 million a year. We're funding $983,000.
We got that. We're at it.
And what is the policy on the replacement mileage? Is it years, mileage, combination of the two, or?
We meet with the departments and we look at the maintenance records, the mileage, and the years on each of the vehicles. And every different type of vehicle has a different replacement age. It ranges from, in some of the public safety, they get vehicles as old as 9 or 10 years old, but they typically would move those back to non-pursuit vehicles. For instance, a need crime prevention would take those vehicles, but we look at each individual piece to see what it's being used for and make sure that the maintenance records, if we have no maintenance on it for 5 years, it's only being driven 200, 300 miles a year, then we would discuss with the department either doing away with that vehicle or keep it in the fleet longer.
Roughly how many vehicles is this $1 million?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but there a completed police unit is about 38,000 with lights, vehicles, and then all the safety equipment that goes on them.
Okay, thank you.
Is any of this trash related?
No, sir.
No? Would that be in your work? Mayor, what about your...
Okay, Mr. Meeks, you on the floor.
Your drainage and street improvements?
Where are you at? What page are you on?
Same page, 4 items up.
Oh, okay, 15 million.
Can I make a suggestion? If you're looking at the capital budget, it might be more helpful for you to go to that section of the budget, which begins in section 14, and there is detail for every single project that gives you what's included, that totals up to those numbers that are listed by category.
Gotcha.
So the drainage and street improvements start on 1423.
That's about 26 vehicles. That's 26 vehicles. That's 38,000.
Yes.
Is the church, is this anything with the state? I know Louise called me and said she got 8 million. I think it was, put in 8 million?
8.2 million.
Is that going to push along this a little faster than what we projected on the Churchland Bridge repair?
It gets us closer. It's a $21 million bill just to do the westbound lane, and they've already given us money to do some preliminary engineering work and some right-of-way work. Right. And this 8.2 million, gets us further into it, but we're going to need roughly about 21, James?
We've got revenue sharing coming this year with 8.2 million. This is about 3 million out.
Okay.
What's that guy?
Okay.
3 million out
from having a refund.
Okay. Good.
Okay. All right. Anybody else got any questions, or before we kind of recap and make sure that the manager and staff understands what we want coming back tomorrow? I mean, because I do want to see that cut. I mean, whether it's 15 or 30%, we still need to see what that does and what that impact is. However you do the formula to come up with whatever number we need to close the gap, we need to see that.
Right. And did everybody? I know you went out and asked for everybody to come back with something. Did everybody bring you something back?
No, not everybody.
Okay. Who didn't bring you nothing back?
I don't. You have a list of everybody that submitted something back. But I didn't go back and check to see who didn't submit something. Some of them were
So it looks like
that's why you get them to cut.
Right.
You ain't gonna bring that back. Give me 20 cents. Right.
Well, Mayor, it looks like he got about 11 cents brought back in departmental savings. So if you cover the 11 cents he got, if you take out departmental savings that he got,
plus the
equalization, and $2 million from risk management and those vehicles, you got about 19 cents, and then you could put some stuff. You could put some stuff back that would be cut. Because there's some things I think we ought to do. If we add all those up, you're looking at about 19. So you could come back and keep your cemeteries whole. You could keep HRT. You could keep the veterans money in there. You could do the assessor's position. There's some, if you take those ones we just mentioned tonight, you take the risk management, the departmental cuts, the museums, And you got enough money right there.
Are you talking about the vacancies?
Well, the vacancies are already part of that total.
I mean, the 1.6.
They're part of that total departmental savings. He already had those in. I mean, they're on his sheet already. Okay. He got a 1.6 on the sheet already, so that's already in there. But I'm saying if you were to take the risk management, the $7+ million he got from all the departmental cuts, the $200K he got from the museums, you would have about 19.8 cents. And now and that's leaving the schools whole. Then you could actually come back and do still take care of the cemetery maintenance. You could still take care of the disabled veterans and the spouse. You could still do HRT. You could take care of your community funding. We need an IT director. I think we need to fill that regardless. That you could keep the IT director and you could keep Jane's position, because those things cost you about $900,000, but you got well over